Hey guys, think getting high is a modern invention? Wrong. Medieval folks were getting high centuries before us. No LED lights, rave music, or DJ. Just a handful of forest herbs and absolute faith that a gnarled root might introduce you to God. Or at least let you chat with a singing chicken. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. And leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. I always find it magical to know who's joining me on these sleepy travels from all corners of the world. Now, lights off, soft fan humming if you like a little white noise, and let's gently drift into tonight's journey. In the Middle Ages, if you came across someone sitting in a wheat field, whispering to a rock like they were negotiating with an angel, chances are they just sipped the wrong brew of henbane root. This versatile little plant could knock you out cold or turn you into a pigeon in about 5 minutes. When reality is mud, hunger, toothaches, and a daily fear of being burned at the stake for looking in the wrong direction, it's no surprise people sought any excuse to escape their minds. They didn't call it getting high. They called it pain relief, dream tea, or simply the thing that stopped Grandma from crying when Grandpa ran off with the turnip seller. There were no prescriptions, no FDA. Every village had a plant expert, usually a granny with 2 teeth or an old man with a sack of dried seeds and a story about the time he met a fairy in his sleep. Recipes were passed around. 1 mandrake root, 2 drops of datura sap, and a whisper to the crescent moon. Nobody knew exactly what would happen, but everyone hoped it didn't involve reliving a past life. One of the most beloved experiments in flying was the fabled flying ointment, a strange paste made of animal fat, hallucinogenic roots, and sometimes bat blood. You didn't drink it, you rubbed it on. Where you rubbed it, though, let's just say it was private. Legend held that if applied correctly, it could allow you to travel through the spirit realm, or in modern terms, lie motionless in a pig pen while imagining you were at a forest fairy gala. There were also many cases of accidental highs. Whole villages unknowingly ate bread contaminated with ergot, a mold that produces powerful hallucinogens. The result? Spontaneous all-night dance parties, people declaring themselves bishops, others seeing fairies, and no one remembering what happened for the next 3 days. Modern scientists call it ergot-induced psychosis. Back then, folks nodded and said, "Weird moon that night." For medieval minds, visions weren't necessarily bad. In many communities, seeing strange things made you chosen. Do you talk to a cat? Excellent. It might be your ancestor. Do you see the light beaming from a chest, treasure, or a demon? The line between divine vision and complete madness was razor thin, and sometimes that blur was what made life bearable. Even monks, strict guardians of the sacred, were low-key herbal partakers. Monastic gardens grew all sorts of herbs, not just for healing, but for deep contemplation. One record tells of a friar who brewed tea from an unnamed flower, meditated for 6 hours, and emerged claiming he heard St. Francis hiccuping. It wasn't mocked, it was documented as spiritual evidence. Of course, not every trip ended well. Many never woke up. They took too much root, inhaled the wrong fumes, or rubbed flying ointment near an open flame. You can imagine the outcome. But in a world where the average lifespan was 35 and a cough could be your farewell, those risks were acceptable. At least if you died watching a field of dancing flowers. There were also medieval love potions, prehistoric cocktails of herbs, blood, vinegar, and hope. 1 sip and you'd fall in love with the next thing you saw. Sometimes a person, sometimes a goat, occasionally your own shadow. But in a world of arranged marriages, feeling real love, even if chemically assisted, was a rare, precious thing. And maybe that's the real reason people in the Middle Ages sought out these highs, not to escape life, but to feel it more deeply, to believe that something magical, wild, and kind still existed beyond the mud and the sermons. So next time you sip peppermint tea, sit still and feel your spirit float just a little. Remember, You've brushed up against the same strange joy medieval souls search their whole lives for. All it takes is a few leaves, a little bravery, and one simple wish: to fly, even if only in dreams. If you've ever dreamed you were a duck performing ballet in the middle of a village market, chances are you drank henbane. And if you haven't had such a dream, congratulations, you're living in the 21st century. But if you were a medieval villager, waking up at midnight screaming like an owl and collapsing into a soup pot wouldn't have raised many eyebrows. Henbane, also known as stinking nightshade, was one of the most versatile plants of the Middle Ages. It served as a sedative, painkiller, anesthetic, mood booster, and occasionally, something that made you believe your lover was a shovel. Its scientific name is Hyoscyamus niger, but medieval folks just called it the plant that made you laugh or scream. So why did they still use it? Because in small amounts, very small, henbane worked. It could help you sleep, ease muscle spasms, soothe toothaches, reduce fevers, and even help you forget that your husband called you a turnip-scented ant yesterday. But take just a bit too much, or the wrong part of the plant, and you might start seeing dead people playing the lute. In medieval folk medicine, henbane was fairly common. Skilled midwives would sometimes mix it into cider to help mothers sleep through the worst of childbirth. Monastic healers turned it into ointments for aching joints. But most villagers? They heard it from a cousin's cousin. Heard this'll knock you out real good. Try it. So they did. The side effects were as colorful as a tavern menu. Dry mouth, racing heart, cold sweats, dreams of talking animals, speaking in unknown tongues, or simply believing you had turned into another species. A famous tale from a small town on the Rhine tells of a cobbler who took henbane for a headache, climbed his roof, and declared himself Lord of the Ducks. He wrapped himself in a blanket, waddled around, and quacked for 4 hours. The townsfolk weren't sure whether to call a doctor or a priest. Henbane was also nicknamed witch's herb, not just because it was often used in flying ointments, but because it popped up frequently in witch trial accusations. If you were caught growing henbane, especially near a graveyard or well, there was a good chance you'd be accused of communing with the devil. And the funny part? Sometimes people were right, not because the user was a witch, but because after taking henbane, they saw demons. Or at least what they thought were demons, dancing around their bread oven. Of course, not everyone who took henbane flew. Some rubbed it on sore feet and slept peacefully. Some brewed a mild tea and just got a little drowsy. The real issue? No one ever quite knew what would happen. There were no dosage instructions, digital scales, or doctors, just a neighbor saying, "My grandma took 2 leaves and felt better." Well, except for 3 days of mild amnesia. Scientifically speaking, henbane contains 2 powerful compounds, hyoscyamin and scopolamine, which affect the nervous system. They relax muscles, reduce pain, and induce sleep. But in larger doses, they cause hallucinations and psychosis. Modern medicine treats it as a dangerous drug, used only under strict supervision. But in the Middle Ages, people used it because they had no choice. Some old texts tried to offer safe recipes, like simmering the plant for 3 hours, avoiding the roots, drying the leaves, and mixing with well water while reciting a prayer. But when you've got a toothache and no dentist, waiting 3 hours sounds less appealing than just chewing a leaf and hoping for the best. Interestingly, henbane was even used as a weapon. One record describes a nobleman soaking henbane in wine and gifting it to his enemies. They didn't die, but spent the whole night kissing candles, chatting with furniture, and proclaiming themselves kings of the cabbage patch. The next day's battle had to be postponed. No one remembered who they were fighting. Henbane's world was a blurry space between dream and nightmare, between sacred visions and madness. For medieval people, it was both a curse and a gift. It made them tremble, but could also, if just for a while, help them forget hunger, pain, or the ever-looming fear of tax collectors. So if you're lying in a clean room, under soft lighting, mouth minty from toothpaste, smile, because you'll never have to choose between an agonizing toothache and a leaf that might make you think you're a duck. But let's be fair. Henbane, while dangerous, was also deeply human. It represented something universal, the desire to escape, to rise above pain, to forget limits, to break free from a harsh reality. And if the price was a brief, beautiful delusion, for them, sometimes, it was worth it. If you think screaming roots only exist in Harry Potter, welcome to the real world, where the mandrake doesn't just yell, but was once believed to be a dangerously powerful herb, as weird and dramatic as a backward violinist at a royal funeral. Mandrake, also known as witch's ginseng, or devil's root, is a plant with a root shaped uncannily like a human. Not just vaguely. It's got a head, stubby limbs, and sometimes grows lopsided like it's waving you toward your doom. No wonder medieval folks believed every mandrake contained a soul, either of a cursed sorcerer or a hanged criminal whose body sprouted into being. Even pulling it out of the ground was a hazard. Legend had it, if you yanked up a mandrake yourself, you'd die. Not from its toxins, though those were real, but because the root would shriek so horrifically, your heart would explode. To avoid this fate, people followed a very serious ritual. At midnight during a full moon, you'd circle the plant with a silver knife, plug your ears with beeswax, and, this part's important, tie a rope to a dog's neck. Then you'd back away, shout the command, and yank the leash. The dog runs, the mandrake pops free, and according to the tale, the dog dies on the spot. You survive, and now you're holding a root worth its weight in gold. Bought at the price of one very good boy, sacrificed in the name of medieval botany. If you're lying in bed right now and getting a little creeped out, don't worry. There's no real evidence that any dogs were cursed, but it shows how seriously people took mandrakes. Seriously enough to devise elaborate methods to avoid dying while harvesting them. Why go through all that? Because mandrakes were believed to do everything. Cure infertility, boost libido, repel demons, and help you dream of the future. Or at least, dream that you're riding a cloud to your crush's cottage. They were brewed into tea, dried into charms, or ground into a paste for skin treatments, if you didn't mind looking like a blushing tomato for days. Like most miracle cures of the time, mandrakes were a double-edged sword. A proper dose puts you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Too much, and you might sleep for 3 days, or find yourself talking to your shadow and hearing it talk back. One tale tells of someone drinking mandrake-infused wine and dreaming of God, who appeared as a French-speaking donkey delivering a sermon. Mandrakes weren't just medicine, they were relics. Some nobles carried them as talismans, others carved them into tiny people, dressed them in doll clothes, placed them in wooden boxes, and fed them a drop of wine each day like newborns, powered entirely by belief. Alchemists thought mandrakes were essential for creating a homunculus, a miniature human that obeyed its master. No one ever successfully made one, of course, but many diagrams show the supposed process. Place a mandrake root inside an egg, bury it in horse manure, and wait 40 days. Romantic. And very, very smelly. Even the church, deeply suspicious of plant magic, couldn't ignore mandrakes. Some monks warned they were tools of the devil. Others secretly used them for healing, or for spiritual vision enhancement. Translation: seeing things you probably shouldn't. During witch trials, being found with a mandrake root was nearly enough to get you convicted, even if you just wanted it for herbal steam therapy. One of the most famous stories comes from England, where a noblewoman carried a small mandrake she named Geoffrey, claiming it spoke to her every night. According to her, Geoffrey told her to plant more onions for good luck. Her garden became a sacred site for pilgrims and enthusiastic onion fans. The mandrake captures everything contradictory about medieval minds: fear and faith, superstition and practicality. Whether chasing miracles, hoping for a prophetic dream, or just trying to sleep through hunger, people clung to these roots like they clung to hope. And in a world full of pain and short on options, that makes sense. So next time you hear the wind rustling through the trees, smile. It might just be the breeze. Or maybe, just maybe, it's a mandrake giggling and inviting you into a prophetic dream, where you marry a cat in shining armor and live happily ever after in a castle made of cheese. In the Middle Ages, beauty could leave you half dead, and not from gossip or scandal, but from the ingredients you smeared on your face. Among the many killer beauty tips of the time, belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade, was perhaps the top contender for most beloved hallucinogenic cosmetic of the 13th century. The name belladonna means beautiful woman in Italian. Sounds enchanting, right? But behind that soft name hides a poisonous plant that just a few berries could send you straight from reality into a cozy chat with angels, or owls preaching in ancient Greek. But hold on. If it was that toxic, why did anyone use it? The answer is simple. They wanted to be beautiful. Women at the time believed that large, glistening, tearful eyes, like candlelit glass orbs, were the height of beauty. The problem? Nobody naturally had eyes like that. But belladonna, which contains a compound that dilates pupils, could help you achieve the porcelain doll effect with just a few drops. One drop of belladonna extract in each eye, and boom, you've got dreamy, wide, soul-swallowing eyes. It also comes with a handy list of side effects: headaches, dizziness, light sensitivity, mistaking your lover for a raccoon, and occasionally thinking your curtains are teaching you medieval folk dancing. But hey, all in the name of beauty. And it wasn't just the ladies. Some gentlemen also used belladonna, not for looks, but to enhance their creativity. Records mention poets and philosophers sipping belladonna tea before writing, convinced it helped them see the truth through the smoke of illusion. The result? Profound works that nobody could understand. In folk medicine, belladonna was used to relieve pain, ease cramps, reduce fevers, and calm upset stomachs. However, with a side effect list that includes dry mouth, rapid heartbeat, garbled speech, and losing control of your limbs, you can see why it was jokingly called a headache cure that makes you forget you had a head. No one knows who was first to think, hey, let's put this in our eyes. But imagine the first experiment. A noble woman tired of her husband ignoring her. She tries a drop of this black liquid. 5 minutes later, her pupils dilated so wide they could swallow souls. The husband turns back, stunned, and proposes again on the spot. Effective. Soon, the entire village is walking around the market with dilated pupils, bumping into posts. Of course, not everyone managed the dosage well. Some used too much and couldn't close their eyes for 3 days. Others used belladonna as perfume, resulting in them smelling nothing but the burnt panic of their nervous system. A popular story among French nobility tells of a countess who used belladonna for over a decade. 2 drops daily, rain or shine, funeral or feast. Her eyes were always dreamy, but she also couldn't recognize who sat across from her. One day she complimented her husband on his lovely floral dress. It was the gardener. Belladonna was promptly added to the high-risk cosmetics, higher-risk marriages list. Outside aristocratic circles, belladonna was also used in love potions, ancient cocktails of herbs, wine, and desperation, said to make someone fall hopelessly in love with you. In theory, sweet. In practice, they remembered you because they ended up in the hospital, gasping for air, watching the ceiling spin. Some village healers burned belladonna leaves in exorcisms, wafting the smoke around those believed to be possessed. The possessed would then mumble gibberish, flail their arms, and pass out. Locals called it proof the demon left. In reality, mild poisoning. Even witches reportedly used belladonna in their famous flying ointments, creams rubbed onto the skin to induce spiritual flight. Some say this led to dreams of flying through forests, chatting with jump-roping cats, or feasting with tooth fairies. Of course, they'd wake up in the chicken coop, hugging straw, while villagers muttered, "Ah, must be Wednesday again." Scientifically, belladonna contains atropine, a powerful nerve suppressant and muscle relaxant. In microdoses, it's still used in modern medicine. But in the Middle Ages, when dosage was based on what feels right, and storage meant leave it next to the cat, disaster was just a drop away. Yet in all that danger lies something very human. The willingness to risk pain for the chance to be seen as beautiful. To widen your eyes. To draw someone's gaze. To feel, if only briefly, like the loveliest person in the room. Even if that room is now spinning. If there's a lesson in belladonna, it's this. Beauty in the Middle Ages wasn't just effort. It was survival through cosmetics. Each drop in the eye wasn't just makeup. It was a whispered hope that you might be beautiful enough to forget the risk. In the Middle Ages, if you saw an older woman climb onto a broomstick, rub some glittering ointment on her thighs, and whisper something in a language that even the priest found unsettling, don't panic just yet. She might simply be applying her flying ointment. Yes, flying ointments weren't a scammy online product or fantasy potion. They were real, used, and widely believed to make people fly to witch gatherings at midnight. Sounds wild? Not really. In a time when arthritis was thought to be caused by demons, flying thanks to lard and herbs wasn't much weirder. The recipe for flying ointment was flexible. You could start with a generous amount of pig fat, toss in some henbane, belladonna, mandrake, a drop of tree resin, a little bat's blood, if you could catch one, the ashes of a toad, assuming you could scold it into silence, and top it all off with a whisper into the night wind. The result? A thick, shimmering paste that smelled like hell's perfume after 3 days in a compost bin. But it was the application method that set this potion apart. According to folk records, and even some witch trial transcripts, the ointment wasn't to be eaten. It was to be rubbed directly onto highly absorbent areas of the body. Yes, those areas. If you're wincing, you're getting the idea. Once applied, the user would lie down, sometimes in the woods, on a dirt floor, in a bath of flowers, and wait to take off. In a semi-conscious state, they dreamed of flying over forests and hills to moonlit feasts, where strawberry wine flowed as rivers and witches danced in circles around the fire, singing strange and beautiful ballads. Some described an out-of-body sensation as if their soul floated off while their body stayed behind, sweating profusely. Others claimed to have ridden broomsticks to bell towers to converse with talking black cats. Still, others remembered encountering fairies and goblins or teaching waltz lessons to demons in velvet cloaks. Of course, all of this could have been intense hallucinations, the result of strong neurotoxic substances like atropine and scopolamine. But back then, no one understood the central nervous system. They understood that if you applied the ointment, lay back, and remembered flying, then by all accounts, you had flown. There were even reports of unintentional flights. One school teacher claimed a strange wind swept him up, fell asleep, and woke up in a goose pen, grass in his hands, convinced he'd danced a dance unknown to mortals. The villagers said he'd been dragged along by witches. He said, "Maybe I sniffed the wrong ointment from my neighbor's rash cream." Flying ointments quickly became a symbol of witchcraft. They were mentioned in denunciations, woodcut illustrations, moral instruction books, and iconic images of hook-nosed hags riding broomsticks across a full moon. Tragically, many women were burned at the stake simply for having an unidentified jar of salve in their homes. One of the most famous confessions came from an Italian woman accused of flying to the Sabbath. After applying the ointment, she told the court that she flew over the mountains to a place lit by green fire, where voices made her heart beat like a war drum. She didn't see demons, only freedom and joy. The judge was not impressed. She was sentenced to death. But before the flames were lit, she said, "At least I once knew what it felt like to not have a headache." Because, yes, flying ointments weren't just for midnight partying. They were used to ease pain, fight insomnia, treat anxiety, and even soothe hemorrhoids, depending on where you applied them, of course. Many users weren't looking to visit the witch's Sabbath. They just wanted one night without being woken by rats chewing their shoes. In that context, flying ointments symbolized the desire to escape. Not the law, but the unbearable weight of daily life. One night, free of nagging, carrying water, and being called that crazy old woman with the suspicious stare. Just you, the forest, the laughter, and a haunting melody echoing from a distant hill. And you know what? Maybe they didn't physically fly, not by modern physics. But if your mind leaves the ground, if your spirit feels free, even in a dream, doesn't that count as flying? So next time you smell something earthy and strange wafting through your window at night, don't be so quick to shut it. It might be a message from a bygone age, a reminder that even in the darkest, most suspicious times, humans have always found a way to fly, on wings, in dreams, or with one spoonful of faith-laced fat. If you think taking medicine is as simple as put it in your mouth, swallow and wait, then, sorry to say, you're way too modern. In the Middle Ages, people didn't just take medicine. They charmed it, whispered to it, rubbed it on strange body parts, and sometimes hid it under their pillow so it could get the idea on its own. Their list of medicinal plants was as long as a suspicious online incense receipt. But how they used them will make you say, wait, they did that? Take headaches, for example. Today you'd pop a paracetamol. Back then, your neighbor would pull out a bundle of herbs that looked like dried scallions, set it on fire like squid jerky, and let the smoke waft straight into your ear. Then she'd pat your shoulder and say, if it's still bad, tomorrow we'll try roasting a chicken foot. Or insomnia. Medieval folks had a remedy called the peaceful pillow of soft dreams. They stuffed lavender, mugwort, valerian root, and no joke, a few baby teeth into a cloth pouch and sewed it into your pillow. That night, you'd either sleep like a log or dream that a grinning pillow was chasing you. Got diarrhea? They'd roast mustard seeds, mix them with honey, and smear it all over the soles of your feet, then make you wear shoes made of whole goatskin. They believed the evil vapors would be drawn down into the ground. You'd still sprint to the bushes every 15 minutes, but hey, warm feet. And if you had a cold, simple. Suck on some angelica root, sip warm water infused with roasted maple ash, and wrap your neck with a scarf soaked in onion wine. If you smell like friendship set on fire afterward, congratulations, you're doing it right. Some herbs were so versatile that people used them for everything, even if no one knew how they worked. Yarrow, for example, could be used to dress wounds, burned in the hearth to banish evil spirits, or chewed raw when you were just feeling emotionally unstable. As they said, if it doesn't cure you, at least you'll feel like you're trying. Some cures were so bizarre you'd think only the truly desperate would attempt them. But back then, desperation was the default. Got a tumor? Smear it with moss scraped from rocks and donkey milk. Toothache? Hover your jaw over sumac smoke and sing hymns. Some places even recommended walking counterclockwise around a church with a coin in your mouth and complete silence until sunrise to cure swollen gums. Some healers went even further. They believed if a plant grew near a grave, it absorbed death essence, and thus was 3 times more powerful. Soon, villagers started planting herbs in cemeteries. You'd pass a funeral and see someone proudly tending basil by the tomb. It's sacred soil. Among the most unusual treatments was the holy ointment, a powder made from finely ground roots, mixed with goose fat and whispered over during a waning moon. You didn't drink it. You rubbed it on your forehead, palms, or under a cat's tongue, if the cat allowed. Side effects included dreaming that you were a plant, or waking up smelling like you'd been slow cooked with anchovies. Some healing rituals were purely theoretical. You didn't even touch the herb. You just looked at it, prayed near it, or slept beside it, and it would know what to do. It was very handy for plants that were too poisonous to handle, or for people who couldn't be bothered. Then, there were the installation art cures. One folk healer once advised a patient with nighttime anxiety to hang 7 mistletoe branches in a star shape on the window, place a single bean in each shoe, and sleep in an X position. If you woke up unafraid of the dark, the treatment worked. If you rolled off the bed because sleeping in an X is impractical, at least you tried. Amid all that chaos, the miraculous part is that people survived. Not just 1 year, but sometimes decades, partly because they were tough, partly because of belief, and largely because some illnesses just gave up after being intimidated by how ridiculous the treatment was. You might laugh, but in a world without antibiotics, without specialists, without Google or emergency hotlines, using plants in bizarre ways was their way of saying, "We're trying. The only way we know how." So next time you see someone hanging garlic in their kitchen, soaking their feet in odd herbs, or sleeping with a rock under their pillow, don't scoff. They might be practicing a modern version of the healing rituals that kept our ancestors alive, using plants, instinct, and a touch of well-managed madness. Imagine you're doubled over in pain, writhing like a fish on dry land, and the first person to help is an old physician with a long beard, holding a smelly leather pouch and saying, "Ah, you must have eaten something that made your bile unhappy." And just like that, you've officially entered the hands of medieval doctors, people who believed your body worked based on 4 bodily humors and the occasional bad mood of Saturn. Medieval healers weren't trained in labs. They learned in marketplaces, monasteries, or straw huts. A diploma? Maybe a piece of parchment with a wax seal from an older healer. Experience? I once cured my father's horse of a cough. Their toolkit? A small knife, a few clay jars, a syringe made from bone, and an unshakable belief that all illness starts in the liver. Their methods were rooted in the theory of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Health was about balance. If you had stomach pain, something was clearly off. Maybe too much black bile. Solution? Drain some blood to restore balance. Simple logic, right? First, they'd examine your skin color and check your pulse by touching your forehead. Then they'd ask deeply medical questions like, "Do you think you ate something that made Mars angry?" Or, "When was the last time your breathing felt symmetrical?" After a few nods, they'd pull out a bowl and a shaving knife, announcing, "We must let some blood out. It'll lighten the body." To be clear, bloodletting has been a serious business for over 500 years. They believed bad blood caused everything, from headaches to heartbreak. And if bleeding didn't work, they'd try purging with herbs or enemas made from wine and salt. Some physicians were especially versatile, also working as astrologers. They'd read your horoscope, track Jupiter's position, and say, "I'll prescribe this, but you must take it on a Wednesday, during a new moon, while standing on one leg. Ask what happens if you miss the day." They'd raise an eyebrow. Then don't be surprised if you grow an extra toe. Of course, not every healer was ridiculous. Some had useful knowledge, or at least sharp memory. They wrote meticulous notes in deerskin journals. Year 10, the patient had a cough. I gave him a decoction of willow bark. He improved after 3 weeks. They didn't know they'd stumbled upon a precursor to aspirin, but they knew that tree did something. There were also famous doctors, traveling from village to village like rock stars of the pre-microphone era. Upon arrival, they'd pitch a tent, lay out roots and powders, and shout, "Come be healed. Even if you're not sick, come prevent it." People lined up. They believed. Some got better, thanks to a placebo or just time. Others worsened but blamed it on forgetting to pray before taking the potion. Nobody blamed the doctor. If something went wrong, it was the gods, fate, or the fact you ate porridge with your left hand. Do you think modern doctors have bad handwriting? Try reading a medieval prescription. It looked like poetry in Latin, with astronomy symbols, owl eyes, and footnotes like, "Take only when the moon is rising in the east." Don't worry if you couldn't read it. Neither could the person who wrote it. Strangely, amid all these experimental adventures in healthcare, some doctors did help. Some knew to disinfect with wine, use honey on wounds, or use herbs for inflammation. They observed, made mistakes, and kept notes, laying the earliest foundations of evidence-based medicine. Sadly, they were often drowned out by folks claiming horseradish cured a broken heart. Doctors also played a social role. They were often the first to know who had a lingering cough, who wasn't sleeping, or who was being emotionally terrorized by their spouse, and urgently needed something to make themselves less audible. Many village healers knew more family secrets than the local priest, probably because they'd drawn blood from everyone in town. Naturally, their services weren't free. The payment was flexible: a chicken, some wheat, a jug of wine, or, if you were poor, a thank you and a hug. One old healer even insisted on payment in the form of a song sung just for him in public. Do you think that's weird? Compared to being prescribed mouthwash made from graveyard root, singing a little tune is a bargain. So there you have it, medieval doctors, part miracle, part gamble. In a world with no concept of germs, no clean water, no microscopes, every healer, no matter how odd, was a warrior fumbling through the dark. They weren't always right, but they tried. For you today, bathing might be a relaxing moment. Hot water, fragrant soap, and your favorite song playing in the background. But in the Middle Ages, well, bathing wasn't just about hygiene. It was an event, a ritual, and sometimes a red flag that you might act too morally suspicious. You heard that right. There was a time when people believed bathing too much could lead to moral decay. Just saying the word bath made priests frown. Bathing with scented oils? Nobles panicked. Bathing in winter? They thought you were mad. Bathing weekly? You were either a witch, or, at the very least, Italian. In medieval European folklore, bathing was tied to all fears, from disease to moral downfall. Why? Partly because water was scarce and dirty, and partly because the church wasn't a fan of you being too clean. Some priests believed that opening your pores with hot water made it easier for evil vapors to sneak in. Clean, smooth skin was seen as dangerous. It could spark desire. A freshly bathed man might attract someone else's wife. A sweet-smelling woman might stir sinful thoughts in noblemen, and thus, society could collapse. So, to keep the peace, you were expected to smell like a horse stable. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some cities were once famous for their public bathhouses: Paris, London, Rome. People went there to soak, chat, make business deals, and sometimes meet a future lover. Bathing wasn't just cleaning, it was social. But that didn't last long. When the plague hit, some self-proclaimed doctors declared, "The bathhouse spreads disease." They argued that bathing opened your pores, letting in toxic air. And so, bathing, already rare, became taboo. People turned to dry scrubbing, perfumed powders, floral waters, and desperate prayers that the smell would disappear. That doesn't mean everyone was moisture deprived. Some people did bathe, but very strategically. Some famous queens bathed once a year, on their birthday, and treated it as a spiritual renewal. One nobleman boasted he hadn't bathed in 30 years and was strong as a bull. According to his maid, though, he smelled like a bull, too. When people did bathe, it was a full ceremony. You had to prepare, boil the water, lay down rugs, light candles, scatter herbs, hang towels. Water was poured into a wooden tub, bucket by bucket, then left to cool. The wealthy bathed first, then the wife, then the eldest children, the younger kids, the maid, and finally, the dog, if the water still wasn't too murky. And people with low incomes? They bathed in rivers, lakes, or streams, if lucky enough to find a private spot and not be fined for polluting holy water. Some families rigged up a bucket over a ceiling beam, poured it over one person, and had others stand guard shouting, "Don't use it all!" A more common phrase than you'd think. There are also records of symbolic bathing. No water involved, just rubbing with wine, oils, or praying. "I am not dirty," one nobleman wrote, "for I anoint myself daily with basil oil and ask Saint Michael to guard my skin." Whether Saint Michael answered is unclear, but anyone nearby was probably praying for a breeze. The medieval bathing world was filled with odd rules. No bathing near holy hours. No bathing during a full moon. Don't bathe while angry. Bathing on a Friday was unlucky, but on Tuesday, bathing meant you were about to get married, or sued. People read omens in water bubbles, interpreted dirt stains as destiny, and blamed demons when the soap fell on the floor. Still, some rebels bathed regularly. They were called eccentric, frail, or attention seekers. But maybe they just didn't want to smell themselves. Choosing to bathe was an act of bravery in a world of smells. Damp straw, wood smoke, sweat, horse dung, and many unnamed horrors. So now, as you sit in your warm shower, soap in hand, soft lighting all around, take a moment to appreciate how far we've come. Think of the woman 800 years ago, trembling as she stepped into an herb bath, hoping no one saw her and lightning didn't strike her for daring to cleanse her pores. Think of the boy dragged to the river to wash his face because it was his mother's birthday. Imagine a family crowded around a single tub, rationing water like slices of birthday cake. And be proud that you, who gets to bathe daily, live in a golden age your ancestors only dreamed of, with a dried root in one hand and eternal hope in the other. If you think perfume is all about being seductive, charming, or radiating a vibe, then welcome to the Middle Ages, where perfume wasn't invented to make you smell good, but to prevent people from fainting when they got too close. Yes. In an era when bathing was a rare spiritual event, and body odor was the fastest way to tell a human from livestock, perfume wasn't just a luxury item. It was a survival tool. The only thing between you and the sad truth is that you've worn the same wool tunic for 3 months without letting it see even a drop of soap. Especially among the nobility, scent masking was a high-stakes art. Whether attending a royal council, an evening banquet, or a public execution, you needed to smell acceptable. Not because people loved fragrance, but because they feared the real smell. Medieval perfumes weren't like the layered designer fragrances of today, with notes of ocean breeze or rainforest bloom. No, they had simpler, more diggable ingredients. Musk, ambergris, pine resin, dried herbs, flower petals, strong spirits, fruit vinegar, all mashed, boiled, soaked, and strained into a potent liquid that could leave people wondering whether you smelled divine, or like you'd just emerged from a cursed Egyptian temple. One of the most popular concoctions was vinegar-based, 4 Thieves vinegar. Legend had it that 4 thieves looted the dead during the plague and never got sick. Their secret? Bathing in herb-infused vinegar. Thus, a famous recipe was born. Rosemary, sage, lavender, and apple cider vinegar. Shake well, spray liberally, and you'll be safe from zombies, probably. No one could confirm if it worked, but people believed it. That belief ran so deep that many wore personal perfume flasks around their necks, like a talisman. These bottles were often so pungent that you must step back to see the person wearing them. Noblewomen had full perfume collections, different scents for different events. Morning perfume with mint and basil, church perfume with resin and bitter orange, and seductive perfume with musk, rose, and something mysterious that made everyone raise a fan to their nose and pretend they weren't intrigued. Some perfumes weren't for spraying, they were for sniffing. Handkerchiefs soaked in scented oil were tucked into sleeves. A quick, elegant dab to the nose could mean the difference between grace and a sudden blackout from the butcher's body fumes when passing through a crowded market. Even medieval physicians joined the fun. They believed scent could heal, especially emotional ailments. Sad? Smell pine resin? Anxious? Orange blossom? Angry? They advised you to sniff your feet as a reminder that everyone has flaws. While it didn't work, at least you were too confused to stay mad. There were powdered perfumes, too, sprinkled into hair, hats, and even shoes. Some noblemen liked to line their armor with scented powder, so that if they died in battle, they'd die in fragrance. Some noblewomen perfumed their fans, books, and even love letters. The resulting notes often smelled more like herbal prescriptions than romantic declarations. In peasant households, DIY perfume was a shared craft. People boiled flowers in booze, bottled it in gourds, or mashed garlic with herbs and rubbed it on their skin, hoping the garlic would get overpowered. Some families had secret perfume recipes, often involving ingredients no one dared question, like springtime tomcat sweat. Of course, not everyone approved of the scent. Some priests called it vanity of the flesh. One man was reportedly punished at confession for wearing perfume to church. The priest said, "You should smell of repentance, not seductive orange blossom." There were also tales of dangerous perfumes. Too strong, too spicy, causing fainting, rashes, or bee attacks. A French nobleman was once chased nearly 2 kilometers by bees after wearing a scent called pressed honey essence. That perfume was promptly banned in Provence. Still, despite the risks, perfume remained essential. It didn't just hide things. It announced that you were cultured, wealthy, and considerate of those trying to breathe near you. Today, we have hundreds of brands, luxury bottles, and tiered fragrance profiles. But don't forget, behind every spritz is a legacy of vinegary brews, wooden flasks on chains, and the undying belief that if you smell good, you can face the world. So don't just think of yourself next time you put on perfume. Think of your ancestors, standing in a crowded market, chin high, misting themselves with bold musk and whispering, "At least today, I don't smell like a horse stable." Do you think modern cleanliness standards are hard? Shaving your legs and armpits, washing your hair twice, using toner, serum, or clay masks? Wait until you hear about medieval hygiene standards, where clean didn't mean comfortable, but often meant painful, bizarre, or potentially life-threatening. We're talking about an era where plucking your eyebrows was religious, and removing your hairline was a beauty standard. Not because anyone hated hair, but because a high forehead was seen as a sign of intelligence and nobility. The higher, the better. The more bald your upper forehead, the closer you were to the angels. Women used every method imaginable to expand this graceful forehead zone, plucking each hair by hand, shaving with stone razors, scraping with sharp oyster shells, and even rubbing a mixture of ash, quicklime, and urine to induce natural hair loss. Yes, quicklime and urine, and your forehead would glow, mostly from pain and regret. And it wasn't just the hair on your head. Eyebrows weren't spared either. Some noble women removed them entirely to create a haloed forehead, emphasizing their eyes as windows to the soul. Eyelashes were trimmed down too, since thick lashes were believed to signal sinful desire. The result? Dozens of proud, bare-faced women who looked like stone statue pigeons had been defiled too often. What about full-body hygiene? Medieval men didn't care much about legs, arms, or other hair. But for women, it was different. Some elite classes believed the ideal woman should have no body hair except on her head. Without electric razors, they turned to knives, tweezers, or homemade wax made from melted honey. Hot honey. Apply. Let it cool and rip. Some experienced aunties passed down herbal waxing recipes, mixed tree resin, sheep fat, and powdered roots for a sticky paste that supposedly removed hair, killed bacteria, theoretically, and hurt enough to make you forget why you started in the first place. Do you think the bikini line is a modern concern? Think again. Some medieval codes of chastity demanded women keep clean even in unseen places, because God sees everything. So noble women were taught to groom regularly with small knives and rosewater. Some succeeded. Some gave up. Some joined convents for peace of mind. Standards varied wildly by region. In France, people loved fragrant, smooth skin. In England, they preferred natural, meaning bushy, as long as it was doused in rosemary water. In Italy, certain nobles believed removing hair meant losing one's life force, since hair was thought to tether the soul to the body. Shave it all, and your spirit might slip out like an egg falling from a careless chef's hand. Beards were a whole other battlefield. A long beard meant wisdom. A short one meant noble warrior. A patchy beard? Possibly hiding an illness. Sometimes men shaved to show devotion. Sometimes they grew facial hair to show maturity. Every few decades, a new beard trend swept through. And every shave involved a bronze blade, cold spring water, and a whispered prayer not to nick an artery. Hair washing? That was a ceremony. Some used soap made from animal fat and lye. Effective, but left your hair smelling like fireplace stew. The wealthy used mixtures of egg yolk, lavender, and wine. Elegant unless it was sunny and you smelled like an omelet. And for the unmentionable regions, what did they use for hygiene? The answer, just about anything. Leaves, rags, dry sand, oyster shells, cotton lumps, and sometimes, no joke, bare hands. Then they'd wipe them on grass. Yes. The truth isn't always pleasant, but don't rush to judge. They did their best, given their tools, knowledge, and living conditions. And sometimes, cleanliness wasn't about smooth skin or nice scent, but the courage to face tweezers, urine, and fireplace ashes, all in the sacred name of beauty. Today, you can book a spa, use a depilatory cream, and bathe in a jacuzzi with sea salt. But remember, once upon a time, a girl shaved her legs with a whetstone in a horse stable by candlelight, just to feel worthy of a love confession from a boy who hadn't brushed his teeth all winter. So next time you're in your warm bathroom, trimming your nails with an electric kit and thinking, beauty is so much work, smile because you live in an age where eyebrows are a personal choice, not proof of moral corruption. Do you think modern cleanliness standards are hard? Shaving your legs and armpits, washing your hair twice, using toner, serum, or clay masks? Wait until you hear about medieval hygiene standards, where clean didn't mean comfortable, but often meant painful, bizarre, or potentially life-threatening. We're talking about an era where plucking your eyebrows was religious and removing your hairline was a beauty standard. Not because anyone hated hair, but because a high forehead was seen as a sign of intelligence and nobility. The higher, the better. The more bald your upper forehead, the closer you were to the angels. Women used every method imaginable to expand this graceful forehead zone. Plucking each hair by hand, shaving with stone razors, scraping with sharp oyster shells, and even rubbing a mixture of ash, quicklime, and urine to induce natural hair loss. Yes, quicklime and urine. And your forehead would glow, mostly from pain and regret. And it wasn't just the hair on your head. Eyebrows weren't spared either. Some noble women removed them entirely to create a haloed forehead, emphasizing their eyes as windows to the soul. Eyelashes were trimmed down too, since thick lashes were believed to signal sinful desire. The result? Dozens of proud, bare-faced women who looked like stone statue pigeons had been defiled too often. What about full-body hygiene? Medieval men didn't care much about legs, arms, or other hair. But for women, it was different. Some elite classes believed the ideal woman should have no body hair except on her head. Without electric razors, they turned to knives, tweezers, or homemade wax made from melted honey. Hot honey, apply, let it cool, and rip. Some experienced aunties passed down herbal waxing recipes, mixed tree resin, sheep fat, and powdered roots for a sticky paste that supposedly removed hair, killed bacteria, theoretically, and hurt enough to make you forget why you started in the first place. Do you think the bikini line is a modern concern? Think again. Some medieval codes of chastity demanded women keep clean even in unseen places, because God sees everything. So noble women were taught to groom regularly with small knives and rosewater. Some succeeded. Some gave up. Some joined convents for peace of mind. Standards varied wildly by region. In France, people loved fragrant, smooth skin. In England, they preferred natural, meaning bushy, as long as it was doused in rosemary water. In Italy, certain nobles believed removing hair meant losing one's life force, since hair was thought to tether the soul to the body. Shave it all, and your spirit might slip out like an egg falling from a careless chef's hand. Beards were a whole other battlefield. A long beard meant wisdom. A short one meant noble warrior. A patchy beard, possibly hiding an illness. Sometimes men shaved to show devotion. Sometimes they grew facial hair to show maturity. Every few decades, a new beard trend swept through. And every shave involved a bronze blade, cold spring water, and a whispered prayer not to nick an artery. Hair washing? That was a ceremony. Some used soap made from animal fat and lye. Effective, but left your hair smelling like fireplace stew. The wealthy used mixtures of egg yolk, lavender, and wine. Elegant unless it was sunny and you smelled like an omelet. And for the unmentionable regions? What did they use for hygiene? The answer? Just about anything. Leaves, rags, dry sand, oyster shells, cotton lumps, and sometimes, no joke, bare hands. Then they'd wipe them on grass. Yes. The truth isn't always pleasant, but don't rush to judge. They did their best, given their tools, knowledge, and living conditions. And sometimes cleanliness wasn't about smooth skin or nice scent, but the courage to face tweezers, urine, and fireplace ashes, all in the sacred name of beauty. Today, you can book a spa, use a depilatory cream, and bathe in a jacuzzi with sea salt. But remember, once upon a time, a girl shaved her legs with a whetstone in a horse stable by candlelight just to feel worthy of a love confession from a boy who hadn't brushed his teeth all winter. So next time you're in your warm bathroom, trimming your nails with an electric kit and thinking, beauty is so much work, smile because you live in an age where eyebrows are a personal choice, not proof of moral corruption. When you think of medieval castles, you might picture towering stone turrets, grand banquet halls, intricately embroidered tapestries, and noble knights on white horses. But there's one thing you probably shouldn't imagine too vividly: the toilet. Because, dear friend, for all the grandeur of the era, the need to go was still very much a normal and very awkward part of life. First, let's clarify. The concept of a bathroom as you know it today, with running water, porcelain bowls, and double-ply lavender-scented toilet paper, did not exist. Medieval folk handled their business in the most literal, basic way possible. That meant wooden buckets, open holes, or, if you were nobility, a stone tower chamber with a direct drop into nature. In large castles, nobles often used a garderobe, a tiny stone room that jutted out from the castle wall, with a round or heart-shaped hole carved into the floor. You'd sit, do your business, and let gravity handle the rest. Below, it could be a garden, a moat, or sometimes the unfortunate head of someone passing too close to the wall. One tale tells of a spy who infiltrated a castle through an underground tunnel, unaware he'd emerged beneath the garderobe of a countess. The result? A literal holy shower, and he was promptly captured after screaming from the stench. Common folk, of course, didn't have stone towers. They had chamber pots, clay jars, or simply a corner of the yard. Every household kept a night pot under the bed at night. In the morning, someone would carry it outside and rinse it, if water was available, or just chuck it into the street. The phrase, "watch out for falling pea," wasn't a joke. In some towns, walking through alleyways without glancing up was a gamble with fate. Some places had public latrines, long wooden benches with multiple holes, no partitions, doors, and no privacy. People sat side by side, chatting about crops or dinner while relieving themselves. It was a very social form of multitasking that no one asked for. But the biggest problem wasn't where to go. It was what to do after. There was no plumbing, no sewage trucks. Some towns hired people, called nightmen, to shovel out waste from pits and cart it beyond city limits. They worked at night with shovels, carts, and a quiet dignity that smelled strongly of their career choice. Toilet paper? Forget it. Medieval people wiped with straw, rags, and leaves, or, in desperate moments, with their hand and a breeze of regret. Some monasteries used smooth pebbles. In certain places, a shared rope was hung and scraped across, cutting off the used portion as needed. In large monasteries, monks had strict schedules for relieving themselves. Some were only allowed to go twice a day, morning and evening. And of course, no talking, no heavy breathing, and queue up in order of holiness, which loosely translated to, the holier you were, the earlier you pooped. Violating these rules could get you punished. One monk had to copy scripture for days because he sighed too loudly while in the garderobe. Another was whipped for lingering too long and looking too content. Still, some nobles tried to elevate the experience. Wealthier lords lined their garderobes with leather, added velvet cushions, and kept a sprig of dried rosemary nearby for scent control. Some palaces even had servants stationed just outside to hold towels, burn incense, or, no joke, play soft music to soothe the moment. Most of the time, though, using the bathroom was a miserable ordeal. And the result? Disease. Cholera, dysentery, and typhoid were caused by raw sewage near homes, contaminated water, and careless waste disposal. But since no one knew about bacteria, they often blamed bad air, evil spirits, or urinating against the wind. Some garderobes were built directly above castle kitchens because the chute was vented outside, saving space. You could be stirring porridge while Lord Edmund pondered a laxative regimen above your head. It was an age of unnecessary intimacy. Today you press a button and everything vanishes like magic. You've got triple-ply paper, gentle scents, and if you're fancy, a heated seat. But remember, once upon a time, your ancestors squatted over a hole in a wind tunnel and prayed pigeons hadn't nested beneath the garderobe that day. So next time you enjoy a clean, quiet bathroom, bow your head to those who came before. Sometimes just outside the upstairs window, in the cold, the wind, and with a bucket full of hope. If you've ever complained that doing laundry today is a hassle, try imagining yourself in the 14th century. No washing machine, no hot water on demand, no cherry blossom scented detergent, and no wrinkle-resistant, antibacterial, ultra-absorbent fabrics. You did have coarse cloth, wooden buckets, fireplace ash, and a perpetually aching back. In medieval times, doing laundry wasn't a chore. It was a journey, a campaign, an event requiring strategy, muscle, good weather, and frequent prayer. Let's start with materials. Most people wore linen, wool, or if wealthy, silk. The problem? None of these are easy to clean. Linen dries into sandpaper. Wool shrinks in hot water. And silk? Handle it wrong, and it melts like a sad romantic under the rain. And rain, for peasants, was not a rare poetic occurrence. It was a constant reality. People didn't do laundry weekly. They washed clothes when there was a clear reason. For example, the wedding dress has honey on it. Church robes acquired horse bite marks. Nightwear became emotionally heavy. Otherwise, most people just aired their clothes out, beat the dust off, sprinkled herbs on top, or simply layered new garments over old ones. When laundry day finally came, the first step was location scouting. If you lived near a river or stream, that was your battlefield. The gear: a giant wooden bucket, a beating stick, and 2 hands tougher than the clothes they scrubbed. Some places even had public washing stations, slanted stone slabs designed to pound fabric like you avenged a village betrayal. There is no commercial soap either. They used lye made from fireplace ash and water, gently caustic, occasionally alarming. The wealthy could afford handmade soap, a mixture of animal fat and ash that smelled like your kitchen after something exploded. Others used soapwort roots, crushed oak leaves, or even, brace yourself, urine fermented for 3 days. Its mild acidity helped lift stains. Apologies if you're sipping tea. Pound, soak, wring, drag, repeat. That was the routine. And remember, cold water, cold hands, cold wind. Some women stood waist-deep in icy rivers, singing just to distract from the joint pain. Some squatted for hours, hunched over, only to return home feeling like a night had trampled their spine. After washing came drying. No balcony clotheslines with stainless steel hooks. People draped garments over bushes, grassy fields, or low roofs. White clothes were left in the sun for natural bleaching. Dark ones were hidden in the shade to avoid fading. And if it rained right after you finished 10 shirts, condolences. In some villages, drying became a social ritual. Those who dried earliest were said to have pleased the cleanliness spirits. Those who aired out tattered clothes risked gossip. Some girls strategically dried laundry near a young man's house to accidentally display their clean, hand-embroidered nightgowns. A highly effective medieval marketing move. Ironing? That wasn't a thing yet. They flattened garments by placing rocks on them, rolling them tightly and sitting on them, or, if ambitious, using heated slabs of iron from the hearth while praying they didn't set the blouse on fire. Wealthier families employed washerwomen, strong-armed, weather-worn women with the rare ability to identify a soup stain on sight. Often undervalued, they were crucial to a household's reputation. No one wanted to be known as the family with moldy shirt collars. But not everyone liked laundry. Some royal courts banned washing within palace walls. The scent of soap bubbles was said to confuse the holy aura, so servants lugged clothing 2 kilometers to the river and dragged it back wet. There were even lazy cheat cleaning methods, hanging clothes near the fire to smoke out the germs, burying them in dry hay to absorb moisture, or rubbing herbs directly onto your body and pretending you were a forest-dwelling saint. And somehow, they survived. They fell in love, they married, they wore wedding dresses washed in ash, dried by wind, and pressed by grandmas behind. Because for them, cleanliness wasn't about being spotless or wrinkle-free. It was about trying. Today, you have hot water, spinning drums, and fabric softeners scented like dreams. But remember, once upon a time someone sat by a riverbank, hands numb in cold water, scrubbing each shirt with love, and hanging it on a tree branch like a tiny prayer. So next time you press that wash button and groan, "Ugh, now I have to fold," just smile. At least you don't have to deal with fermented pee, or chase dogs off your freshly dried wedding gown. If you think cleaning the house is boring, a medieval villager would scoff and say, "Oh no, it's a sacred battle." Because back then, keeping a home clean wasn't just about wielding a broom. It involved roosters, spells, mysterious roots, and, of course, a lot of faith. First, picture your typical medieval home. Mud walls, dirt floors, thatched roof, no cement, no glass windows, no vacuum cleaner, running water, or air fresheners that smell like green tea and peace. You had dust dancing in the wind, kitchen smoke hanging in the rafters, and the occasional chicken wandering into the bedroom. Floors were often made of, yes, actual packed dirt. To clean them, people scattered sweet herbs, dry straws, crushed bean pods, or dried flowers on top. The idea was that this would absorb moisture, scent the room, and hide stains. After a few weeks, the top layer was swept away, and a new one was laid down. Think of it as natural carpet replacement, with a bonus bouquet. Some industrious housewives had custom floor blends, sun-dried lemon peels, crushed lavender, bay leaves mixed with fireplace ash, tossed by the handful like sowing hopeful seeds. Guests would step in and exclaim, "Wow, it smells like a garden about to explode." As for brooms, forget ostrich feathers or ergonomic handles. A medieval broom was a bundle of twigs tied together, used for sweeping straw, dust, or even evil spirits if necessary. Some believed sweeping counterclockwise would drive away bad luck. Others used a rooster to cleanse the house by walking it around in a basket. If it squawked loudly, that spot was spiritually filthy. Cleaning was not just physical labor, it was ritual. People sang while sweeping. They prayed while wiping altars. On special days, like Clean Friday, whole villages would sweep courtyards, scrub doors, rinse statues, and burn incense to banish the old season. Children ran around yelling, partly to lighten the mood and scare off rats. Dust wasn't wiped with wet cloths. They used chicken feathers, palm leaves, or simply blew hard. In some regions, they wiped with vinegar-soaked rags. Vinegar cleaned and masked smells, assuming you didn't mind smelling like pickled feet. The filthiest and most frequently cleaned kitchen was scrubbed with ashes for pots, rice water for dishes, and salt for scouring axes. In cautious households, pine needle water was boiled to wipe everything down, disinfecting and leaving the house smelling like a sacred forest shrine. Cleaning tools were often delightfully strange. Snail shells as brushes, chicken thigh bones to poke dust from corners, donkey tail hairs tied into floor brushes. Villagers didn't have much, but they mastered upcycling centuries before it became a Pinterest trend. And then there were the beliefs. Clean your windows on a rainy day, and your happiness will escape. Sweep the floor at night, and you'll sweep away your fortune. Forget to wash your hands after mucking the pigsty, and you'll lose your spouse. That last one wasn't superstition, it was basic hygiene. One legendary old lady was known for her spotless home. Her secret? A custom potion made from ash, vinegar, garlic wine, and a whispered spell. Clean as the heart of a shepherd who never lied. Visitors were always amazed, until they found out she kept 3 children just to mop the floor. Slight exaggeration, maybe, but her floor stayed pristine. To be fair, cleanliness standards then weren't about killing bacteria. They didn't know bacteria existed. Clean meant not visibly dirty. No strange odors. No mysterious slime. There is no dead rat in plain sight. If you met those 3, you were considered a woman of light. And in a world without cleaning sprays, disinfectants, or glass cleaners, everything was handled with patience, herbs, and stubborn optimism. A clean house was a triumph of sweat, creativity, and sometimes whispered prayers while scrubbing the windowsill. Today, you have vacuum robots, air purifiers, multi-purpose wipes, and sprays that kill 99.9% of germs. But once, someone knelt on a dirt floor, swept with their hands, wiped with scraps, and believed every speck of dust removed was one bad omen swept away. So next time you feel overwhelmed cleaning, think of the older woman in a damp kitchen, mumbling softly, broom in hand, chasing away soot like she was polishing her family's entire past. Among the many constants of medieval life, poverty, prayers, and dirty water, there was one small but infuriating nuisance: lice. No, you couldn't escape them. Whether you were a peasant sleeping in straw or a noble reclining beneath embroidered bed curtains, your body was likely home to a thriving insect colony, friendly to each other, just not to you. The list is endless. Lice, fleas, bedbugs, ticks, flies, blood-sucking beetles, and the worst part? Medieval people considered them normal. Not because they liked them, but because they had no real way to eliminate them. Let's start with lice, the eternal enemy of a clean scalp. Medieval folks had no shampoo, electric combs, or anti-lice sprays. They had thick-toothed combs, often made of wood or bone, to remove lice one at a time. Some used diluted vinegar to soak their hair to soften it and make life a bit more breathless. In monasteries, monks often picked lice off one another as a form of spiritual bonding. Ancient illustrations even depict one monk solemnly searching his brother's sleeve for bugs. No one found that strange. It was brotherly care in the itchiest sense. And if you think lice were only on the scalp, oh no. There were body lice, clothing lice, and even hat lice. Some people even documented eyebrow lice, which only appeared if you hadn't washed your headscarf in weeks and lived too close to a sheep pen. The most popular solution? Shave it all off. Women covered their bald heads with sheer veils. Noblemen wore hats for warmth, and anyone with hair was seen as brave. In some regions, monthly head shaving was considered a sign of piety, though, according to servants, it was really about scratching less. And bedbugs? They loved burrowing into straw, cloth, and wood cracks. You thought you were relaxing after a long day plowing fields, until an army of bedbugs launched a midnight assault. They left behind bites, welts, and the kind of psychological trauma that made people sleep sitting up. Medieval bug defense? Sprinkle ash, herbs, or minced garlic around the bed. Some built beds from cold stone so bugs wouldn't nest. More extreme? Sleep in a suspended hammock with bowls of water under each post, so any bug trying to climb up would drown. Fleas? They were a national emergency. They didn't just live on cats and dogs. They lived on humans, in clothes, in rugs, and carried the plague. One tiny bite could lead to the death of millions. But medieval folks didn't know that. All they knew was flea bites equals itch. One French noble reportedly kept a civet in his coat pocket to repel fleas. Others wore long-beaked bird masks stuffed with herbs, not to look cool, but to avoid the stink and keep bugs out of their noses. And yes, medieval folks loved pest-hunting pets. Dogs, cats, ferrets, owls, and even chickens were let loose indoors to hunt bugs. One old woman famously kept a hedgehog under her bed to poke to death any crawling thing. Simple, spiky, effective. There were also bizarre folk remedies: rubbing horse ash on your skin, burning onion skins under the bed, or chewing mint and breathing on your pillow. Some healers even taught people to trick the lice by leaving a ragged shirt in the corner for them to crawl into, and then burning it a week later. And some people just gave up. If you don't scratch, you won't itch, they'd say. They coexisted with bugs like neighbors who threw loud parties, annoying but too persistent to evict. One noble woman even wrote in her diary, "7 lice on my collar this morning. A lucky number." That's the kind of terrifying optimism only medieval life could inspire. Today, you have sprays, vacuums, lice treatments, and sealed mattresses. But remember, your ancestors once slept in the hay, scratched silently, and saw it all as just another part of life, like sunsets or distant rooster crows. So next time a mosquito buzzes near your lamp, don't panic. Think of your forebears, picking lice by hand, placing bowls of water under their beds, and laughing in the night as bed bugs dropped from the thatched roof into the soup pot below. When you think of pets, you might picture a fluffy dog resting on a rug or a haughty cat strutting around like it owns the place. But in the Middle Ages, pets weren't just companions. They were survival tools, flea hunters, and occasionally, the reason you had fleas in your bed. That's right. Medieval pets were not fragrant, not obedient, not vaccinated, and didn't know how to sit on command. But they were essential, not for their cuteness, but for their usefulness. Cats were the royalty of medieval pets and victims of deep superstition. During darker times, cats, especially black ones, were considered evil incarnate. Many believed they were companions of witches, spies for dark spirits, or worse, shape-shifting witches themselves sneaking around while you were trying to use the bathroom. What happened? Mass cat killings during the early plague years, followed by a massive boom in the rat population. People eventually realized, oh wait, cats are actually kind of useful. And so cats were forgiven, and even appointed as official housekeepers in many monasteries, granaries, and inns. Some cats were given names, bells, sun-dried fish, and, if they were especially good at mouse murdering, even had tiny cloaks sewn from goatskin to keep them warm. A few became so beloved that they were honored with tombstones depicting them mid-scratch, forever chasing eternal rodents. What about dogs? Medieval dogs had many jobs: guarding the home, herding sheep, pulling carts, and, most importantly, barking at strangers who wandered into the village. Some noble households kept lapdogs, not because they were cute, but because they were warm. Most dogs, though, were skinny, scrappy, and could chase a runaway goose for 3 miles without stopping. They didn't bathe, weren't brushed, didn't wear fancy collars. But they knew how to lie quietly under the table, rest a paw on your foot, and growl low when someone suspicious walked in. Yes, even if it was that aunt you hated since the wedding feast. Beyond cats and dogs, there were other pets. Or, more accurately, animals that lived with you whether you liked it or not. Take mice. No one wanted mice, but they moved in any way. They ran across beams, dove into rice jars, and occasionally nibbled your toe while you dreamed of fresh bread. Some set traps, some unleashed the cat. Others, especially elderly ladies, talked to the mice. They believed if you treated them kindly, the mice would skip your pantry and nibble the neighbors. Beetles, fleas, bed bugs, and mites were pets that invited themselves in. They dropped from the rafters onto your soup, skittered across your blanket, and shopped in your straw mattress like they'd signed a lease. Some folks tried hedgehog bristles, pepper dust, or ashes to drive them off, but mostly, they just coexisted. It was easier. Some homes kept birds, canaries, starlings, or whatever chirped sweetly. They were hung in bamboo cages by the window for music, alerting you if a cat got too close. One older man taught his bird to speak, and it became his daily conversation partner. Every morning they'd take turns saying, "Nice sunshine today, isn't it?" Some people even kept pigs indoors, not for cuddles, but for warmth. The pig would sleep beside them, snorting like a breathing body pillow. One girl cried all night because her mother made her put Chubby the pig back in the sty. A smelly friendship, but a sincere one. Of course, living with medieval pets wasn't just love and cuddles. You had to share their smell, fleas, and mysterious 2 a.m. noises. You had to accept that your cat might give birth in your chest of wedding clothes, that your dog might bark the moment you finally drift off, that your neighbor's goose might break in and eat the bread you just baked. Still, in a world full of mildew, disease, and loneliness, pets, of any kind, gave people the feeling that they weren't truly alone, that something was breathing beside them, scratching, blinking, and sometimes just quietly watching them smile. Today, your pets may be vaccinated, wear sweaters, have digital health records, and throw birthday parties. But remember, your ancestors once cradled a flea-ridden cat, split their bread with a muddy dog, and lit candles praying for the day their starling would sing on the first snowy morning. Because sometimes, cleanliness isn't just about a house without fleas. It's about a heart warmed by a small, scruffy, unwashed creature who never leaves your side. Imagine waking up on a chilly morning in the 14th century, tossing off your blanket, stretching your arms, and realizing you've just disturbed an entire owl's nest that had taken residence in your hair. Yes, hair in medieval times was no small matter. While today you may have shampoo, conditioner, hair dryers, smoothing serums, and scalp spa appointments, your ancestors had tree roots, fingernails, and a fragile hope that it wouldn't rain that day. First, let's be clear. Medieval people cared deeply about hair. Thick, long, shiny hair symbolized youth, health, and virtue if you were a woman. Many women would grow their hair without cutting, dyeing, or curling it, believing each strand was a whispered prayer to God. Men may have been less poetic, but they still took pride in having hair that blocked the wind like a church roof. However, taking care of that hair? It's a real challenge. No commercial shampoo, no salons, no Moroccan argan oil treatment. They did have wood ash water, diluted vinegar, or, on days when they felt they deserved luxury, beaten raw egg mixed with rose water. It sounds fancy, but in practice, it was sticky. After coating your scalp with raw egg, you'd wait for it to soak into your soul, then rinse it off with ice-cold well water. Get the timing wrong, and you'd end up with a hairstyle best described as an undercooked omelet. No eggs? Use ash. Ash from oak or maple wood was boiled and mixed with water to create a mild lye solution, like shampoo. Some grandmothers even added root oils or steeped mint leaves for a fresh forest scent. Sadly, the forest smell often lost the battle to the scent of a decades-old well. Washing was the easy part. Drying was the nightmare. No blow dryers, no super absorbent towels, no year-round sunshine. You had to sit by the hearth or stand in the yard, drying your hair while swatting away chickens. If it rained, your hair would stay damp for 3 days. Enough time to cultivate its ecosystem of fungi. And tangles? Medieval people didn't wake up to detangle their hair with an anti-static wooden brush. They used bone combs, fingers, or, in many cases, someone else. Hair brushing was a social activity. Wives combed their husbands' hair, sisters combed each other's. Monks combed one another's scalps. If you were too old to do it yourself, your neighbor might show up to help and recount your youthful misdeeds while unraveling straw-like knots from your head. Not everyone had great hair. Dandruff was common. People used ash powder, vinegar, and, no joke, fermented cow urine to cleanse the scalp. Some even burned onion skins, mixed them with honey, and rubbed the mixture onto their head like a mysterious stew marinade. Itchy scalp. It could be dandruff. It could be lice. It could be your ancestor's ghost drumming a message that it's time to shave your head. Whatever the reason, people often sat outside, scratching and praying, or asked a friend to check their scalp by parting the hair in the sunlight and staring deeply into shared fear. Styling? Of course. Women braided their hair into elaborate crowns. Noble ladies used sheep fat to hold curls in place and secured them with ribbons, dried flowers, or, on special days, silver combs shaped like crosses. Men, they went for light waves, tousled volume, like they'd just galloped through a morning fog. Most of it, though, was just the wind and neglect. In monasteries, hair carried spiritual meaning. Monks shaved the top of their heads, leaving a ring of hair called a tonsure, a sign of renouncing the secular world. The problem? That exposed circle let in a lot of wind. Some monks wore wool hats year-round, not because of the cold, but because birds kept trying to nest in their scalp. Superstition ran rampant. Tangled hair was seen as a sign of a lost soul. Hair that was too beautiful? Surely a pact with a forest witch. One girl was recorded in a medieval chronicle as being interrogated because her hair was suspiciously shiny despite her home having no access to clean water. And regardless of who you were, hair fell out. Due to poor nutrition. From wearing a metal helmet all day. From scratching too much. People dealt with balding by wearing hats, wrapping scarves, or, if they were wealthy, hiring someone to sculpt wax wigs. A medieval toupee that melted if you stood too close to a roast. Today, you have full hair care routines. Wash, condition, mask, serum, and even high-end wigs if you like changing them up. But remember, your ancestors once washed their hair with ash, dried it by fire, combed it with bone, and believed dandruff was a divine test. So next time you groan about your messy hair in the morning, think of the medieval woman sitting by the coals, clutching a broken comb, brushing her waist-length hair with the patience of a monk, and dreaming of peppermint shampoo like the one in your shower. In the Middle Ages, when everything from homes to humans tended to carry a bit of a scent, anyone who managed to stay clean, fragrant, and spiritually refreshed was seen as both lucky and a little reckless. Among the boldest inventions, steam baths and herbal saunas rose to fame, not just to cleanse the body, but to detox the spirit, open pores, and, rumor had it, make your body odor temporarily resemble rosemary. But don't picture a luxurious cedarwood sauna glowing with soft golden light. Imagine a makeshift tent or a small stone room, heated with roasted rocks, filled with straw, herbs, and sometimes ash, where you'd sit sweating like you were about to greet the sun god in person. Steam baths weren't just about hygiene, they were purification rituals. People believed sweat carried away evil spirits, sins, and the stench of overdue cheese. Each drop of sweat was seen as an inner ugliness being expelled. Of course, they had no idea what toxins or bacteria were. They just knew that after a session, you sat gasping, red-faced like a ripe tomato, but at least you didn't smell quite like before. Common sauna herbs included rosemary, sage, mint, thyme, and cabbage leaves if it was especially cold. Not because cabbage smells nice, but because it was available and felt strong. Some folks added drops of homemade oils, distilled from lemon peels, tree roots, or pine bark. But most of the time, the steam was just boiling water in a wooden bucket, puffing up like a witch's cauldron of ghost porridge. People sat in towels, or, often, nothing at all. In villages, steam baths were family or community affairs. In some places, the entire town gathered once a month for communal sweating, equal parts hygiene and gossip. As you dripped, you'd hear who got married, lost a cow, and had a leg cramp mid-planting season. Of course, not everyone loved social nudity. Wealthier folks sought private booths, if they could afford it, or built small tents in their backyards, covered their heads in leaves, and imagined themselves as Scandinavian royalty. Afterward, people would rinse with cool water, or wipe off with dry linen. There were no towels, no body lotion, but there was ash, diluted wine, or apple cider vinegar, rubbed on like medieval toner. It stung for a while, then gave the illusion of cleanliness, or at least numbed your senses enough that you didn't care anymore. And it wasn't just bodies being steamed, minds were too. Many believed breathing in herbal vapors expelled worry. One elderly woman advised, when sad, breathe deep from sage leaves. If still sad, breathe deeper. A very honest cure for melancholy through partial suffocation. Some people did head steaming alone, especially for colds. They'd boil ginger or mint leaves, cover their heads with a cloth, and breathe until they felt like they were conversing with ancestors in the mist. Add lemon and salt, and the experience becomes half soup, half spiritual awakening. The result? Clear sinuses, a lighter head, slightly sticky hair, but a soul somehow soothed. In winter, steam was salvation. When icy wind crept through every crack, a pot of herbal steam could warm the soul. Some families even held grand steaming nights, where everyone gathered around the hearth, threw herbs into a boiling pot, breathed deeply, and told ghost stories, like, "My great-grandfather once steamed so hard he passed out, but woke up with no joint pain." Not everyone approved, of course. Some conservative monks believed steam opened the pores and invited demons in. Perhaps because one monk steamed too long, fainted, and spoke fluent Latin for 3 days. No one could tell if it was a fever or divine enlightenment. Still, steaming was seen as an act of self-love. A rustic kind of spa where you sat in smoke, dripped sweat, and thought, "At least I'm not shoveling horse dung right now." Today you have dry, wet saunas, premium wooden benches, 100% natural essential oils, and peaceful background music. But don't forget, your ancestors once sat in straw huts, towel-wrapped heads dripping sweat into bowls of leaf water, smiling through the steam as if wild herbs could heal everything. So next time you step into a cedar-scented steam room, close your eyes and imagine sitting beside a medieval grandma who tossed sage into the pot and whispered, "Sweat is the devil's tears leaving your body." And then you both laugh and cough a little because the smoke intensified. In the Middle Ages, when the concept of soap still flickered like a distant dream, body odor wasn't an accident. It was a vivid, ever-present reality, floating around you like a stubborn ghost. Don't get it wrong. Medieval people did care about bad smells. They just didn't have many options. Like wanting peanut butter ice cream in the desert. You know it's delicious, but all you've got is sand and wishful thinking. Human scent, something we try to hide today, was a constant part of medieval life. Everyone had a smell: sweat, straw, wood smoke, raw animal hide, forgotten cheese. Everyone was a unique olfactory symphony, and standing close together created a fragrance that needed no words and deserved none. People did their best with what they had. For example, perfumes, not luxury sprays in fancy glass bottles, but herbal infusions, scented vinegar, or mysterious concoctions from street vendors claiming their liquid could make you smell divine and repel demons, all from a suspicious wooden barrel. One popular scent was Four Thieves vinegar, a mix of apple cider vinegar, rosemary, sage, lavender, and mint. Legend says 4 thieves used it to rob plague victims without getting sick. Science hasn't confirmed its powers, but the stench alone probably kept everyone, including germs, far away. Nobles went more extravagant. Their perfumes were made from rose oil, distilled mint water, pine resin, and sometimes ambergris, a waxy substance from sperm whale intestines with a smoky musk considered elite. One drop kept you fragrant for 3 days. It also might attract every wild dog within 5 miles. But perfume wasn't enough. They wore scent accessories. The most popular? The pomander, a small silver ball stuffed with dried herbs, flowers, and occasionally powdered amber. It hung from the neck, belt, or sleeve. If someone came too close, one strategic arm wave sent a fragrant, "back off" message. Social boundaries, medieval style. Commoners improvised. They tucked dried mint or partially eaten orange peels into their sleeves. One old woman was known to sprinkle lavender powder on her husband's collar each morning, not to make him smell nice, but so she wouldn't faint when he leaned in to ask, "Breakfast?" The issue was that your body still sweated no matter what you sprayed. And remember, no deodorant, no roll-ons, no 48-hour dry spray with alpine breeze. The closest thing: vinegar or moisture-absorbing herbs like bay leaf powder or white clay. Some noblewomen reportedly dabbed perfumed powder under their arms, then gently waved their sleeves to distribute the scent, a performance of desperation wrapped in grace. Some took pride in their smell. One knight claimed his battle musk scared horses. Others saw sweat as a sign of hard work and honesty, unlike the fake, clean, perfumed types. It was a philosophy hard to argue with since no one wanted to get close enough to try. Of course, body odor could cause real problems. At big events, like summer church services in 3 layers of clothing, things got thick. One record notes a soldier fainted after inhaling the combined armpit aroma of 3 nobles at once. No one was punished. They simply opened more windows. Religious folk also cared about scent, not for hygiene, but for holiness. They burned incense, fumigated rooms with resins, and sprinkled flowers on their beds, believing clean-smelling spaces repelled demons. Some monks carried sacred sachets filled with dried chamomile, cloves, and ashes of old prayer books. Effectiveness is unknown. Branding? Impeccable. And finally, the most essential skill is pretending not to smell anything. It was a survival art. When someone passed by exuding aged ham and wet goat, you didn't flinch. You smiled politely, breathed through your mouth, and changed the subject. Medieval folks mastered this. They knew the world wasn't always fresh, but kindness was still possible. They could pretend. They could hold back comments about the odor strong enough to wilt table flowers. And that, sometimes, mattered more than any perfume. Today, you've got everything. Niche fragrances, tropical breeze deodorant, and smart sprays that track sweat. But remember, your ancestors once sprayed vinegar on their necks, wore silver scent balls, and learned to smile while standing in a crowd that smelled like a barnyard festival. So next time you catch a whiff of someone with a bold scent, take a gentle breath, smile, and remind yourself, at least no one's wearing moldy orange peels in their sleeve. If you've ever thought you were having a bad day just because your filtered water smells faintly of chlorine, congratulations. At least you're not living in the Middle Ages. Back then, clean water was a myth, and anyone who drank without getting a week-long stomachache probably deserved sainthood. Medieval water wasn't the crystal-clear stream you see in period dramas with flowing-haired singers perched on rocks. It came from village wells, rivers, or, if you were really lucky, from a rain barrel sitting next to the chicken coop. The problem? Everyone threw everything into the river. Waste, garbage, animal carcasses, laundry water, and sometimes secrets better left unknown. Someone upstream washed vegetables. Someone midstream bathed their horse. Someone downstream cooked soup. It was a closed-loop system, just not in a good way. Wells wasn't much better. Many weren't built properly. Some were dug next to pigsties, because convenient. Others had no covers. One rainstorm flooded them with bacteria, mud, and the occasional mystery hair. Some people said cloudy water meant mischievous spirits were stirring, rather than the more likely culprit. 10 muddy buckets that day. And then came the drinking. Dysentery, cholera, typhoid, malaria, mystery gut illnesses. 1 in 2 people had stomach trouble at least 3 times a year. And those 3 times could cost you 5 pounds, all your fluids, and your remaining faith in hydration. Still, medieval folks weren't helpless. They had methods to clean water their way, like boiling it, if they had firewood, or filtering it through cloth, assuming the cloth wasn't last used to wipe a pig. Some added charcoal, rice husks, mint leaves, or even a lucky stone to the water, hoping it would absorb the bad vibes and microbes. There were legends of holy wells with pure, sweet, healing water. But to drink from them, you had to walk for 3 days, climb 2 hills, and not swear once. It would be a real challenge if a cow kicked you in the backside that morning. So many turned to an alternative. Beer. Not beer as you know it. No high alcohol fizz or served cold. This weak beer was made from barley, boiled water, and yeast. Because the brewing process required boiling, beer was often safer than water. Kids drank it. Pregnant women drank it. Sober people drank it. And drunk ones, even more. Some villages started the day with bread and a mug of weak beer. A popular saying was, "Never trust a man who drinks water without flinching." Because if he didn't flinch, He either had iron guts or wasn't human. Of course, no one knew the words E. coli or salmonella. They knew that drinking from the backyard well made your gut twist like the gears in a nobleman's clock. Some believed dirty water was a punishment for sin. Improper baptism? Offending your ancestors? Lying while drinking? Your intestines would react immediately. There was even a profession, water fetcher for hire. These brave souls traveled farther to draw water from more trustworthy sources and sold it at a premium. It was twice the cost, but at least you weren't spending a week on your straw mattress, feeling like a boiling cauldron. One old woman only trusted water from the abbot's well. Because priests never relieved themselves nearby, she insisted. In larger towns, there were sometimes piped water systems using wooden channels or lead pipes, but they regularly cracked, rusted, or got jammed with frogs, courtesy of mischievous children. So most folks went back to Plan A. Boil everything. Some brewed water with mint leaves, some added salt, some prayed before drinking. Others just didn't drink, preferring thin gruel instead. The medieval stomach wasn't just an organ, but a test of bravery. Today, you turn on a tap and get clean, filtered, mineral-enhanced, chilled water, even bottled for your convenience. But remember, your ancestors once had to smell water before drinking it. And if it smelled off, they'd sigh, scoop a bit with a wooden spoon, look toward the heavens, and drink as if it were their last day on earth. So next time you grumble because your faucet is running a little slow, think of the medieval farmer who drank from a well next to the horse stable, and then spent a week on straw, clutching his stomach, wondering what he'd done to anger God. If you've ever stepped into a modern public restroom and thought, well, that was unforgettable. Imagine walking into a medieval public latrine where everything was shared, the smells, the sounds, and occasionally an unexpected spiritual experience. First of all, erase any concept of privacy. No stalls, no wooden doors, no gentle background music to mask honest noises. Instead, a medieval public toilet was usually a long wooden bench with round holes, lined up like a classroom, except everyone faced a different kind of lesson and paid far more attention. These latrines were often built over large pits or directly above running streams to carry everything away, in theory. In reality, what was carried away was usually just hope. There were no separate restrooms for men and women. First come, first seated. You might relieve yourself while chatting with an older woman about turnip soup, or be asked by an 8-year-old boy if you saw the rat swim under your feet. Many activities, zero privacy. Some places even decorated their latrines with wall paintings, dried flowers in the corners, or inscribed sayings like, "He who sits long ponders deeply." Though in reality, people sat long because things were clogged. In a few towns, people were hired to clean the facilities, known as the keepers of the seat. Usually, folks with limited career options, these workers carried brooms, wore cloths over their faces, and bore the dead-eyed stare of someone who had seen too much. When someone left a stall, they would step in, sprinkle lime, swat flies, and, if they recognized you, wish you a light journey. Of course, not everyone enjoyed public restrooms. Wealthy nobles and merchants often carried their chamber pots, ceramic, lidded, sometimes ornate, even inscribed with the owner's name. A servant would take it and, after use, discreetly seal it up and move along as if nothing had happened. But for most common folk, the chamber pot was a luxury. They lined up for the communal toilet. On busy days, people would reserve a spot using stones. A smooth, round stone on the wooden bench signaled, "This seat is taken." And wiping? That was a whole different art form. No toilet paper. People used scraps of cloth, leaves, straw, or, desperately, a shared wiping stick, sometimes rinsed in ash, or not. In some monasteries, monks used a sponge tied to a stick, soaked in vinegar, then hung it back for the next user. You simply continued the tradition. Disturbing? Perhaps. But for them, it was everyday life. Everyone just endured together. You sat beside a stranger, staring silently at the wall, exchanging no words or questions. just the sound of wind through the cracks and your quietly trembling soul. Of course, accidents happened. People fell into pits, dropped purses, dropped hats, dropped chickens. Some tripped and hit their heads on the bench, waking to communal laughter. One man reportedly hid in the latrine to avoid paying taxes, and was discovered 4 hours later, snoring. In some larger cities, the authorities built more advanced facilities, elevated latrines with drainage systems, stone walls, roofs, and entrance fees. Attendants collected coins, handed out clothes, and sometimes issued timed entry passes. Upon exit, they might remind you, "Next time, bring your stone. It's crowded today." Some even used the toilet as a secret meeting spot. Since few people entered unless necessary, it became the perfect location for clandestine romance. One couple was reportedly caught holding hands silently at holes 7 and 8. After that, the latrine was reorganized. Even-numbered holes for solo visitors and odd-numbered holes for group reflection. Bizarre as it sounds, medieval public toilets embodied a strong sense of community. Everyone had to go, and once sat on that cold, creaky bench, balancing awkwardly, staring into the distance, whispering, "Please let there be no chickens today. Today, your restroom has stalls, 3-ply paper, hand dryers, seat warmers, even mood lighting. But remember, your ancestors once stood in line on freezing mornings, sat on frosty wooden planks, and prayed the person before them hadn't eaten too many onions. So the next time you grumble about a busy public bathroom, picture yourself sitting shoulder to shoulder with a granny telling ghost stories while 2 cats chase each other under your feet. And be grateful that today, at least, you have a door." If you've ever stared into the mirror, electric trimmer in hand, hesitating to pluck a rogue eyebrow hair for fear of messing up the symmetry, take comfort in this warm little thought. At least you're not living in medieval times, where facial hair removal was sometimes a religious ritual, a measure of moral character and, sadly, a form of group entertainment. Yes, you heard that right. Hair, especially on the face, underarms, arms, and forehead, was a top-tier aesthetic obsession for centuries. People would pluck, shave, scrape, burn, wax, and gently scratch with conviction, all in pursuit of the ultimate goal: smooth, clean, and a forehead as vast as one's intellect. Let's start with the men. A well-groomed beard could symbolize power, maturity, and, in some cases, the ability to tax peasants with just a glance. But during certain eras, beards were considered a sign of laziness. So men didn't just shave. They plucked their beards by hand, used crude razors and whetstones, or hired a street barber if they could afford it. Barbers back then weren't like your modern hipster stylist, no herbal tea. There was no talk of soccer, no fade and undercut. They wielded blades sharp as a knight's sword, wiped them on their trousers, yanked your skin taut, and shaved you in complete silence like it was a sacred rite. You didn't twitch, you didn't sneeze, and if you heard the words "oops," "slipped," you'd be wearing a wool hat for the next 2 weeks. For women, the situation was creatively intense. Noble women in medieval Europe adored a high forehead. The higher and barer the brow, the more beautiful. They plucked their temples, hairlines, and sometimes their eyebrows to achieve the thinking angel look. Some went so far that their foreheads stretched halfway back to their scalps. Others tied tight bands across their heads to force the hairline to recede. Painful, but chic. Some used concoctions made of tree resin, lime powder, charcoal, and vinegar to remove hair. It sounds like something from a witch's cookbook, and it sort of was. Others applied quicklime paste, sat silently while the fumes rose to heaven, and waited for their hair to dissolve, their skin to sting, and their souls to quietly exit their bodies. Underarm hair? It must go not only for looks, but also because it was believed to trap sin and sweat. Those who could afford it removed it regularly, with razors, tweezers, or the most ancient method, asking a relative to help pluck it out. It is a rare form of family bonding indeed. Peasants without access to tools used fire. small glowing coal passed lightly over the skin. Think spiritual cleansing, but with third-degree burns. Others used sharpening stones, rubbing until the hair fell out, and the skin thinned like eggshells. Some simply wore long sleeves and prayed no one noticed the quiet forest growing beneath. In certain regions, a folk remedy involved applying bitter mugwort leaves to the area, chanting a charm and ripping it off swiftly. Whether it worked is unclear, but it left an impression. Historical records even describe noble women's hair removal kits, complete with silver tweezers, imported Persian depilatory powder, a pumice stone, and a silk handkerchief for wiping tears. Because plucking facial hair by hand in winter was not exactly self-care Sunday. Leg hair? That depended. In some areas, thick leg hair was seen as natural protection. In others, women shaved and applied goat fat to soften the skin. One brave soul reportedly used hot beeswax, a strip of cloth, and a whispered prayer, resulting in 1 week of smoothness, 2 weeks of pain, and one skirt ruined forever by sticky wax residue. Of course, not everyone liked this smooth craze. In some villages, hair was considered a sign of natural strength and divine design. Some grandmothers scorned the forehead-plucking madness, calling it the cold-headed foolishness of youth. Today, you've got laser hair removal, Veet cream, 5-blade razors, sugar wax, and a dermatologist on speed dial. But remember, your ancestors used fireplace ash, vinegar, whetstones, tiny flames, and pure courage to remove each strand, just to be called proper and presentable. So next time you're annoyed that your hair grows back too fast, think of that medieval woman sitting by the hearth, tweezers in one hand, bronze mirror in the other, brow furrowed as she whispers to herself, "I definitely look smarter without a hairline, right?" When you think of beauty, your mind might go to glossy hair, glowing skin, or luscious red lips. But there's one tiny, very small detail that medieval folk didn't overlook, even if it was usually hidden beneath wool socks, stiff leather shoes, or a thin layer of mud, fingernails and feet. Even in an era when bathing was considered an occasional luxury, clean nails, both hands and feet, were part of basic human dignity. Nobody was painting their nails medieval earth brown number 3, but everyone knew that long, blackened, or jagged nails made you look like you just dug up something you weren't supposed to. Let's start with fingernails. Most medieval people worked with their hands, farming, hauling water, kneading dough, chopping wood, sewing, so nails got chipped, filthy, or sometimes partially removed. That's why people trimmed their nails on the weekend, meaning Sunday. Not with shiny stainless steel clippers, but with small knives, miniature sickles, or even their teeth. Yes, some folks bit their nails to keep them tidy, and called it tool-free efficiency. There were no nail salons, but there were clever homemakers. They knew how to smooth nails with flat stones, scrub them with vinegar and ash, and paint tiny turmeric flowers onto their nails if they were feeling romantic. It is a subtle beauty ritual, best enjoyed by people patient enough to admire their fingers in candlelight. And the nobility? Oh, they went all out. Some shaped their nails into delicate crescents. Others carved them into tiny spearheads for that elegant and deadly vibe. Noble women even hired people to tend to their nails while they lounged, nibbled grapes, and gossiped. These nail attendants, lacking clippers, wielded tiny knives with the delicacy of jewelers. One slip, and you'd have a tragic court tale to tell. Clean nails were also vital for monks and clergy. After all, hands touched sacred relics and flipped holy texts. Dirty nails? Not. Some monks cleansed their hands and nails with blessed roots, using wooden combs to scrape out physical and spiritual dirt. Now, let's talk about feet, a raw and rugged story. Medieval footwear was no luxury, stiff leather, narrow toes, and no padding. Some people went barefoot year-round, others had just one church pair. Feet were routinely cracked, scratched, and perfumed like a goat pen after rain. Still, foot care was essential. Everyone knew, healthy feet equals survival. At night, folks would soak their feet in warm water, sometimes with salt or mint leaves, to clean and, allegedly, avoid stepping on a rooster in their dreams. Some women soaked their feet in ginger root decoctions and applied sheep fat for moisture. Others used stones to scrub their heels. Some scraped off calluses with the edge of a wooden spoon. And if you think the spa is a modern concept, think again. There were medieval girls cross-legged by the fire, smiling at their newly softened heels. For at least 10 minutes. Noble feet, of course, had higher standards. White, soft, and faintly fragrant. Linen socks, rose-scented foot water, yes, perfume for feet, and silver anklets elevate the ankle experience. A rosy heel meant you never had to walk far, meaning you were real nobility. But not everyone flaunted their feet. In many places, feet were considered dangerously attractive. One priest even declared, "To glimpse a woman's ankle is to glimpse an angel's wing you weren't ready to meet." Cue knee-high socks, floor-length dresses, and toes hidden like grandma's secret beer recipe. Still, toenails got trimmed, even discreetly. One old folk warning said, "Trim your toenails under a full moon, speak no words while cutting, and bury the clippings beneath a rosemary bush, lest a cat eats them and you limp forever." Very specific. Zero scientific backing. Today you have nail salons, massage chairs, electric files, cuticle creams, and bubbling foot soaks. But remember, once upon a time, a girl scraped her toenails with broken pottery, rubbed in mashed ginger root, then stuffed her feet into leather shoes stiff enough to deflect arrows, and still believed that pretty feet were the kind that suffered. So next time you break a nail, get dry heels, or can't decide on your nail polish color, think of that medieval woman sitting by the hearth, iron tweezers in hand, tending to her feet with a smile and a simple belief. If someone truly loves me, they'll love this heel too. Nothing shatters the romantic illusion of the Middle Ages faster than a giant zit smack in the middle of your forehead on village fair day. Yes, acne was a timeless curse, even without selfies or gym lighting. And in a time with no cleansers, retinol, or spa treatments, medieval folks fought their breakouts with the ultimate weapons: belief and edible herbs. Let's be clear, pimples were not rare. Poor diets, dirty water, smoky air, sweaty clothes, and the occasional night spent next to a pig conspired to turn your face into a rebellious drama stage. But while you might now slap on a clay mask and whine online, medieval people only had leaves, fireplace ash, and the neighbor lady who once heard her brother-in-law's wife's mother say rabbit poop worked wonders. Some classic medieval acne treatments included: 1. Ash mixed with vinegar, dabbed on zits like a medieval disinfectant. Then you'd sit and wait for fate. Some said it dried pimples. Others said it dried your entire face. Everyone agreed. The smell ensured no one stared at you too long. 2. Herbal infusions like chamomile, sage, or willow bark are used as toners, cooling and anti-inflammatory, unless you overdid it and your skin turned a suspicious saint statue green. 3. Mud from a sacred pond, collected only during the new moon. Some smeared it across their faces, and some used it like a clay mask. Monks said it absorbed evil energies. Teenagers said it absorbed Crush's attention. Of course, popping pimples was universal, but there were no sleek metal tools. People used fingernails, smooth pebbles, or wooden spoons. Hygiene was a gamble. Some rinsed with ash water. Others dabbed honey for antibacterial relief. And if it didn't heal, well, at least it was sweet. Some believed acne was a punishment. Clerics preached that pimples were caused by impure thoughts or prideful glances. So if you broke out before a holy feast, you were expected to look repentant, avoid mirrors, and not say, "Wow, I look amazing." Noble women weren't allowed to show blemishes. They covered them with white lead powder or plaster mixed with rosewater. One account tells of a lady using a mask made of crushed pearls, goat's milk, and goose fat. No idea if it worked, but you could smell her coming from 20 feet away. A popular folk remedy was the patience bread mask. Stale bread mashed with milk, smeared on the face while lying still in the pigsty, the coolest place in the house. Praying ants wouldn't find you. And acne wasn't the only skin issue. Rashes, redness, and allergic reactions were often caused by lice, dust, or sleeping with a molting hen. Treatments included 1. Mashed cabbage leaves. Cool skin, reduce swelling, and make you look like a side dish. 2. Bathing in licorice root water. Soothes irritation and makes you smell like a vintage candy stick. 3. Pine resin mixed with honey. Meant to heal the skin, but mainly attracted hornets with feelings. If things got serious, you went to the village healer, or, if desperate, the local witch. She'd inspect your face, mutter a chant, sprinkle sacred dust, and declare, "Your face is like a turnip field, but you'll be fine if you avoid pork for 3 days." And you'd obey, because what if she was right? Some people simply gave up. "Bad skin is fate," they'd say. "If someone truly loves me, they'll love the red spot next to my nose too." It is a deeply medieval, wildly optimistic philosophy, especially if you were out of clean ash. Today, you have pimple patches, toners, serums, steaming devices, dermatologists. But remember, your ancestors fought acne with fireplace soot, old herbs, and stubborn faith in leaf powders and whispered prayers by the hearth. So the next time a pimple rises and your confidence plummets, think of the medieval girl, mud on her forehead, sitting still in the goat pen and telling herself, "If I'm not beautiful today, maybe tomorrow, it'll rain, and everything will wash away." If you've ever sighed over the rough skin on your elbows or felt the urge to detox your skin with a volcanic clay mask from Iceland, congratulations, you're living in the modern age. In medieval times, the phrase exfoliation didn't exist, but the idea of scraping off the old filth to reveal a better version of yourself underneath? Oh, that did. And it did so with boldness. The average medieval person's skin was routinely covered in dust, sweat, and religious hope in a world of mud, hearth smoke, and 3 layers of wool. And when it came time to refresh themselves, they turned to the most familiar ingredients: sand, nutshells, salt, fine charcoal, and, yes, animal hair. Let's start with the most common method: scrubbing. People used old burlap, coarse cloths, or soft, dried grass to rub down their skin. In some villages, folks would mix fireplace ash with salt and scrub their elbows, heels, and anywhere else they thought could benefit from divine renovation. It stung, but at least you'd end up as clean as a freshly whitewashed chapel wall if it were washed with an onion. Nobles took a more refined approach. Imported pumice stones from Italy were smoothed into little round discs. Noble ladies would sit by a window, the sunlight glowing on their cheeks, gently exfoliating their heels while recounting a dream of seeing the Virgin Mary. It was a moment both holy and silky smooth. Others used crushed walnut shells mixed with water to scrub their faces. The natural oils in the shells gave a strong cleansing sensation, and occasionally left the skin as red as a ripened tomato. Still, everyone nodded approvingly. Red means circulation. Circulation means long life. After scrubbing away the sins of the world, it was time to moisturize. No French creams, no collagen masks, but they did have the next best thing: sheep fat. Yes, sheep fat was the ultimate medieval moisturizer. It was soft, warming, and could be applied to the face, hands, and lips. Or, if needed, to oil a squeaky door hinge. It was melted, strained, and mixed with dried lavender, mint leaves, or tree resin to create a scented balm. The result? You'd smell like a meadow and shine like a church mirror. Peasants often kept a small jar of sheep fat by the bed. Before sleep, they'd rub it on cracked hands, dry cheeks, and, during winter, even on their noses. One old woman swore, "Smearing sheep fat before bed is the only way to wake up without feeling fossilized." The nobility had more lavish blends: sheep fat, almond butter, a few drops of rose oil, hand-squeezed by an overworked gardener, and sometimes, just for status, a pinch of powdered gold leaf. Skincare wasn't just beauty, it was prestige, even if that prestige attracted flies better than a roast boar. Beyond sheep fat were egg whites, cucumber juice, rose water, and even honeyed wine. Folk wisdom claimed that if it was good to eat, it was good for the soul. and even better when smeared across your T-zone. Some women applied oatmeal paste at night, lying perfectly still like an unbaked pastry, whispering prayers for skin less like a turnip. Herbal baths were also essential. People boiled shiso leaves, mint, and orange peels, poured the mix into wooden tubs, soaked their hands and feet, and then used that same water to wipe their faces. It cooled the skin, smelled nice, and occasionally led the neighbor to comment, "You look almost like someone who hasn't been sleeping in the pigsty lately." Of course, things didn't always go well. Some people reacted to the ash, others broke out from tree resin. One poor soul had a cat lick their cheek clean after applying honey. But they persevered, because beauty, back then, was an effort. It's not an app. Someone once said, "Beautiful skin isn't born, it's fought for." A classic bit of grandma wisdom, often spoken while gently smearing mud onto a grandchild's forehead, whispering sweet encouragement. Today, you have serums, moisturizers, targeted treatments, facial massagers, and LED therapy lights. But remember, your ancestors once rubbed salt into their cheeks, smeared sheep fat on their legs, applied old bread to their forehead, and believed that beauty didn't come from jars, but from the unshakable faith that tomorrow might itch just a little bit less. So the next time you step into your bathroom and open a cabinet lined with 3 layers of skincare, remember the medieval farmer rinsing his face with basil water, gripping a jar of sheep fat, and telling himself, "As long as my skin's not flaking off today, I must be doing something right." Imagine you're a medieval lady. You wake up at the rooster's crow, let out a gentle yawn, and begin your day with a beauty ritual that, though it lacks ring lights or makeup tutorials, holds the power to turn you into a walking plaster statue. Medieval makeup wasn't about confidence and radiance or following trends. It was about looking like you were slowly dying of elegance. Your skin had to be pale, your cheeks gently blushed, your lips delicately pursed as if mid-prayer. And above all, you must not look healthy. Let's start with the base. Today, you might use primer, foundation, or cushion. Back then, you had white lead powder. That's right, lead. In powder or cream form, mix with vinegar, milk, or rose water if you want to smell nice while fainting. Women applied it to their face, neck, even their hands, all to achieve a complexion as pale as sheepskin parchment. No one cared that it was toxic. If your skin started peeling, maybe I'm rejuvenating. If you get nauseous or dizzy, beauty takes sacrifice. Some women used a blend of lead, vinegar, and crushed pearls, known as moon milk cream. It gave a faint glow, partly from candlelight, partly because your skin was starting to swell. Peasant women didn't use lead. They turned to lime powder, rice flour, or plain white ash from the hearth, mixed with cold water. They applied it with their fingers or, if fancy, a piece of old linen cloth. It never looked even, but it gave the impression that your face was a work in progress. Next came the blush. No 12-shade palette here. Medieval women used 1. Beetroot juice, applied directly or mixed with sheep fat. 2. Crushed rose petals blended with olive oil. 3. Boiled down red wine dabbed gently on the cheeks as if someone had complimented you subtly. The rule was to get just the right amount of flush. Too much, and you were seen as wanton as an overripe plum. Too little, and you looked like you'd just climbed 3 cathedral stairs. Done right, it resembled the soft glow of sunset upon a pot of porridge. Done wrong? You looked like you'd passed out on a pile of red radishes. As for the lips, they had to be small, pursed, and slightly pale. Sometimes women used pigeon blood, beet juice with vinegar, or, for the rich, pomegranate oil mixed with beeswax. Some texts even recommended, to redden lips, gently kiss a wine-soaked cloth. It worked, but often made men think you'd been sipping the altar wine. One trick involved outlining the lips with charcoal to add depth and introspection. The risk? You might nervously lick your lips and end up with teeth that look like you've eaten a bowl of soot. Eyebrows were a sacred matter. Some women shaved them off. Others plucked them thin as thread. Some drew them back on using charcoal mixed with egg yolk. A few noble ladies arched them high like bows, part seduction, part pondering the mysteries of scripture. Forehead hair and sideburns were plucked to elongate the face. The result? A forehead like a bronze drum, ideal for framing under any headdress. There was also a quieter form of beautification, facial steaming. Women boiled water with chamomile, mint, and rosemary leaves. They sat under a cloth, inhaling herbal vapor until their face was as red as a boiled onion. Afterward, they gently applied sheep tallow and sat still, waiting for the essence to soak into the soul. One session could last 2 hours, or however long until the old lady beside you started telling stories about how a priest once called her remarkably clean. Some noble women glued tiny pearls to their cheeks or lined their eyes with gold powder. Others dabbed charcoal into their tear ducts for a sad but stunning look. Some even drew on fake teardrops to appear as if they'd just wept for people with low incomes, when, in truth, they were crying because the lead powder had seeped into their eyes. Of course, makeup came with risks. Lead caused poisoning. Charcoal dried the skin. Lime powder mildly corroded the face. And if you accidentally grabbed lavender oil instead of flytrap, well, too bad. But medieval women still wore makeup, not for pictures, but because they believed beauty was a duty. Today, you have non-toxic, paraben-free cosmetics with SPF, hydration, anti-aging properties, and a light floral scent. But remember, your ancestors powdered their faces with lime, reddened their cheeks with beets, outlined their eyes with soot, and smiled as if they enjoyed the burning. So next time you're torn between cream blush or matte finish, think of the medieval woman dabbing wine onto her cheeks, lips trembling, whispering, "May the Lord keep this lead powder from making me faint during the wedding." If you think choosing a hairstyle in the morning is a challenge, between soft waves, a high ponytail, or a trendy, messy bun, imagine living in the 14th century, where a single exposed hair could be considered provocative as winking in a cathedral. Yes, medieval hairstyles weren't just about aesthetics. They signaled morality, social class, and sometimes even marital status. And most importantly, the higher the forehead, the closer to God. Let's start with the most legendary belief. A high forehead was beautiful. Not just intelligent looking, but vast, majestic, with the hairline receding so far it seemed in danger of falling off the back of your head. Medieval women, especially nobles, plucked their hairlines and temple hair, and even shaved the front of their heads to create faces long and solemn like scrolls of scripture. They used bronze tweezers, wooden ones, or hot wax. Was it painful? Yes, but it was elegant. The sensation? Like God testing your patience one hair at a time. Some women would sit for hours, plucking until their hairline looked as clean as a cathedral window. Next came the styling. Married women had to keep their hair hidden. Always. Hair was a private part, meant only for their husband and, occasionally, the local witch to see. So they twisted, braided, wrapped, and covered it, with veils, caps, or, on special days, silk circlets tied with lace. The most popular look was twin braids wrapped around the head like braided bread, topped with a coif. A tight fabric cap tied under the chin, looking modest but suspicious. Some used bone combs. Without conditioner, they detangled with fingers, patience, and hope. Mothers would rub their daughters' hair with lard and essential oils each morning to set the style and the virtue. Unmarried women were allowed to wear their hair loose on certain occasions, especially if they wanted people to know they were available. Long, thick, shiny hair was marital capital. Some adorned it with dried flowers, ribbons, or tiny silver chains, walking through the market slowly enough for everyone to get a good look. There were also styles like the ram's horn, two massive side buns curled like horns. Those who wore it often had personal servants just to twist, or the hennin, a towering cone-shaped hat like an upside-down ice cream. Women in hennins had to tilt their heads to pass through doors, and without a helper to manage the veil, they might lose all spatial awareness. For commoners, hair was usually braided, coiled low and tightly wrapped. Some wrapped their heads in so many layers that they looked like they'd just stacked the bed linens on their scalp. A girl might use her mother's old silk scarf, embroidered with the future husband's name in red thread, a silent prayer infused with smoke and hope. Dirty hair? Of course. Washing was rare, so they used wood ash powder, mustard oil, or an egg vinegar mix to absorb grease and add aroma. Then came heavy brushing and a scarf, to mask the smell and scalp. Naturally, men weren't left out. Medieval gents preferred mid-length hair, slightly waved, or breezy like wind from the Normandy fields. Some styled it with beeswax, rosewater, or sheep fat infused with herbs. A well-coiffed look could convince others you owned land. Clerics had tonsures, shaved crowns with a halo of remaining hair. It's a mark of humility, and a great way to catch a cold. Some monks wore woolen hats year-round, partly for warmth, partly to avoid birds landing on their heads. In some places, hairstyle denoted status. Wives without children wore a side bun. Widows tied theirs low at the nape. Brides-to-be wore twin braids with silver combs, a subtle signal unless a strong wind blew off their veil and exposed their entire social message. Today, you have curling irons, straighteners, styling mousse, shine serums, and TikToks promising perfect buns in 12 seconds. But remember, your ancestors spent hours plucking hairlines, combing with bone, tying with twine, and wrapping it all in 3 layers of cloth, just to look like they weren't trying. So next time you stress about limp roots, off-center parts, or indecision between a bun or loose waves, think of the medieval woman braiding her hair by candlelight, rinsing with boiled herbs instead of conditioner, and whispering to herself, "The higher the forehead, the closer to heaven." In medieval movies, you often see gentlemen stepping out of bed in flowing white shirts, while ladies writhe gracefully in embroidered silk, shoulders glowing in candlelight. But in reality, brace yourself, because medieval underwear was anything but sexy. Let's start with the basics. Medieval people didn't have underwear like ours. No bras, no lace panties. There are no matching sets. Instead, they wore chemises, a type of long linen underdress, a plain nightshirt, unhemmed, unembroidered, and often not washed very often. Women wore chemises under everything. Dresses, outer gowns, corsets, layers of skirts, all stacked atop this base layer. It touched the skin and soaked up sweat, grime, oil, and all the day's sinful thoughts. Without perfume, the chemise simply smelled like life. Men wore braies, baggy linen shorts tied at the waist. They looked like short, puffy boxers. On top, they wore a long linen shirt, down to the knees, called a shirt. Wake up, tie on the braies, throw on an outer layer, and you are ready to plow a field or charge into battle. Tight-fitting underwear? It didn't exist. Commando was the default. Some nobles might wear a linen liner between their skin and trousers, but common folk? They chose airflow. The less you wore under there, the less laundry you had to do. Laundry was a half-day job that usually came with back pain. Women didn't have bras as we know them, but they did have support. They wore laced garments, like a kirtle, to flatten and secure the chest, not to lift or enhance, just to hold things in place while grinding grain or chasing chickens. Here's the fun part. Not everyone wore underwear daily. Some sources suggest peasants only wore a chemise in cold weather or for special occasions. On regular days, one outer layer, quick and laundry-friendly. In a world without washing machines, laundry was a chore on par with building a cathedral bell tower. A common question: did medieval women wear pants? The answer: most didn't. They wore long layered skirts and trusted in the breeze. God's way of keeping you alert. Men wore trousers, yes, but often with a window, called a codpiece. This detachable flap fastened with buttons or ties allowed easy access when armored up. High in practicality, low in subtlety. At one point, the codpiece became a full-on symbol of masculinity. Men stuffed it, embroidered it, polished it, to signal, "I am strong, surrender now." Some even had lions or dragons stitched on. You couldn't tell from a distance if it was clothing or a public warning. As for cleaning, even basic underwear needed washing. People soaked it in ash water, scrubbed it by hand, and then hung it on yard ropes. In winter, it dried by the fire, often leaving your chemise smelling like burnt wood. And yesterday's stew. Sexy lingerie? Not quite. Some noble women opted for thinner linen, whiter fabric, or a bit of lace trim, very rare. No lace bras, but yes. There were flirtatious glances from behind layers of linen and the slow, suggestive sound of untying laces. Romantic writers loved the scene. She slipped off her chemise, hair tumbling down, candlelight glinting off skin pale as unbaked bread. You get the idea. In monastic orders, underwear rules were strict. Some monks were required to wear several layers to prevent unholy feelings. One monk wrote in his journal, "I added another layer today to remember Christ's sacrifice and avoid sinful thoughts after dark." Today, you have endless choices: cotton, lace, silk, sporty, lounging, sleeping, barely there. But remember, your ancestors got by with a square of linen, tied by hand, dried by firewood, and still managed to live, love, and occasionally fall asleep in a haystack. So next time you're debating padded versus wireless or cursing a wedgie, think of the medieval woman tying her chemise by the weak morning light, sighing and thinking, "At least it's not raining. I can dry the laundry today." Suppose you've ever dyed your hair and felt that telltale itchy tingle on your scalp or worried whether the color would take. Then congratulations. You're living in an age where nobody expects hair dye to make you glow. In the Middle Ages, however, people dyed their hair with ingredients that would make modern labs hesitate. But they accepted it all in the name of beauty, even looking like a half-dead ink pot for a few days. Yes, dyeing hair in medieval times was no casual affair. It was part beauty ritual, class indicator, and religious symbol. And occasionally, a clever ploy to dodge the head tax. The most coveted shade? Angelic golden blonde. Blonde hair was seen as holy, pure, and, in the eyes of medieval men, like the Virgin Mary, but dateable. The issue? Most Europeans had brown, black, or ashy hair. So how did they achieve that sacred blonde? Easy. Sunshine plus chemicals. A common medieval dye recipe included urine aged 3 days, alum, rhubarb root, and fireplace ash. Mix it all, slather it on your hair, wrap it in cloth, and sit in the sun for about 2 hours. Then rinse with chamomile water. The result? Maybe blonde, maybe scorched, maybe bald. But everyone agreed. The smell is assertive. Some texts mention lemon juice and vinegar under sunlight for lightening. A milder method unless you accidentally used rancid bacon grease instead of vinegar. Many women let their hair out the window each morning, hoping dawn light and secret concoctions would turn them into pre-Renaissance Rapunzels. For those desiring deep black hair, there was a mix of boiled walnut shells, charcoal soot, and olive oil. Apply, wrap in linen, and leave it on from 6 hours to whenever the Lord calls for supper. The result: shiny black locks, long-lasting color, and a fragrance reminiscent of the post-harvest incense pit. But hair wasn't the only target. Some people wanted to change their skin color. Yes, in the Middle Ages, skin tone was a status symbol. Tan skin? You worked outdoors. Pale skin like the flu? You were probably upper class. Noble women applied white lead, lime water, or crushed pearl paste to lighten their skin. Some even drank vinegar with alum to purify the blood and brighten the complexion. The result? Pale. Yes, but also vaguely seasick. Men were more straightforward. Some rubbed red earth on their faces before battle to look rugged. Others kept their skin fair to prove, "I have servants." A few monks chewed dried mint leaves, believing it detoxified from within, even if they still had pimples. At least their breath was minty. And then came the bizarre. The trend of glowing. Some noble women reportedly applied white mineral powder mixed with ambergris to reflect candlelight like a holy fog. One even dusted her wrists with powdered gold so her forearms shimmered like a subtle curse when she lifted a wine cup. Dangerous? Absolutely. Alluring? Definitely. Naturally, accidents happen. Someone had a severe reaction after sleeping overnight in Alamash hair paste. A young woman fainted mid-feast from too much white lead on her face. One elderly lady accidentally mixed iron filings into her face cream and ended up slightly rusting at the ears. But the important thing was that they tried, and in the medieval mind, that was admirable. Today you have professional salons, safe color charts, clinically tested cosmetics, sunscreen and skincare tailored to your undertone. But remember, your ancestors once sat in the midday sun, hair reeking of fermented vinegar, chewing rhubarb root, and hoping, just hoping, they'd look like an angel, before being stung by bees drawn to the sugar. So next time you're torn between caramel or copper chestnut, think of the medieval woman gripping a basin of nettle juice, taking a deep breath and whispering to herself, "If my skin doesn't burn and my hair doesn't fall out, then today is a successful beauty day." If you're feeling a bit dizzy, congratulations. You've survived a beauty journey with no skincare, Wi-Fi, facial cleansing devices, and no apology from history. And yet, strangely enough, through the mud, the smoke, the lack of soap, and the surplus of goat scent, one thing remained unchanged. People still wanted to feel beautiful. Yes, beauty wasn't invented by Instagram or Sephora. Even when our ancestors were wearing coarse tunics, living under thatched roofs, and listening to rats argue in the rafters, they were scrubbing their faces with salt, plucking their foreheads, dabbing vinegar on their cheeks, and smearing mud on their feet, just to feel a little more presentable. Because no matter the century, beauty wasn't just about impressing others. It was a small act of control in a chaotic life. When winter came, the crops failed, and your roof collapsed in the rain. A little chalk powder on your cheeks could be a silent declaration. I'm still here. I'm still me. You might think they were insane. Why smear fireplace ash on your face, dye your hair with urine, or pluck your hairline bald? But look at yourself. With your night cream that costs half a paycheck, your nose-lifting strips, your shapewear, your under-eye patches, and those satin pajamas no one can sleep in because the lace itches too much. Is it really that different? Okay, we have TikTok. But while the tools have changed, the reason hasn't. Beauty is the dance between instinct and society. It's when you put on red lipstick because you're sad when you deep condition your hair, even though you're working from home when you adjust your collar before an online meeting, with the camera off. Medieval people understood that. They didn't call it self-care, but every time they rubbed sheep fat on cracked hands, washed their only chemise in cold ash water, paused mid-field to comb their hair with a bone comb, those were tender acts of self-respect. And let's not forget the comedy. Beauty, in any era, is always a little ridiculous. You shave your legs just to wear long pants. You apply a mud mask and forget to turn off your Zoom. You spend 2 hours blow-drying your hair and then put on a helmet. And yet, you'll do it all again tomorrow. So did they. An older woman smeared turmeric on her cheeks and then went out to harvest cabbages. After dyeing her hair with a potion that smelled like soup gone wrong, a girl dried her hair. A nobleman wore a hennin so tall he couldn't walk through his door, and still thought he looked fashionable, all of them. Silly, endearing moments of stubborn effort. And funny enough, it's in those efforts that they became most human. Not perfect, not logical, but fiercely determined, armed with sheep grease and fragile hope. Today, you have options. You can be beautiful however you want. Skin tone, long or short hair, makeup or bare-faced. But if one day you lose inspiration, if you feel ugly in a world that feels messy, remember your ancestors. Patient, sometimes clumsy, but always trying to preserve a little light for themselves. So whether you're layering 9 steps of serum or detangling your hair with your fingers after a nap, Remind yourself that you're continuing an ancient tradition. A tradition of beauty not just for the outside, but out of respect for who you are. And if one day you accidentally smear toothpaste on your face instead of moisturizer, don't worry. Medieval folks once used snail slime to brighten the skin. You're already doing way better. Thank you for joining me on this strange, funny, slightly smelly journey. Remember, whether you're rubbing sheep fat or pushing a serum pump, you are, in your way, part of humanity's most beautiful survival art, trying to look good in a muddy world. Sleep well, dream of naturally shiny hair without needing a hair mask, and may that dream last, at least until morning.